Chapter 569. Probably because he looked down on Su Fengnian from the bottom of his heart, the waiter spoke with an air of generosity. He kept saying that if Su Fengnian didn't have a few hundred taels of silver, he shouldn't go to Lei Ming Temple to puff himself up at his own cost. Su Fengnian dismissed it with a laugh, saying that he would consider burning incense. While he was at it, Su Fengnian also praised the richness of Wuhou City, saying that as a foreigner, he had broadened his horizons. Only then did the waiter's expression turn for the better, and his tone of voice became warmer. Su Fengnian received the copper key, not forgetting to give him a few pieces of silver, and asked him to hang the watermelons in a bamboo basket and place them in the well water in the backyard. The waiter said, "Good," and happily left with the 2 watermelons. He found this scholar more and more pleasing to the eye. Su Fengnian put down the bookcase, took down the spring and autumn sword and placed them on the table. Before he left, he stuck 2 silk threads between the cracks of the window and the door, which were hard to detect. When he pushed them open, they would break. He then nailed the flying sword, Morning Dew, with its perfect sword embryo to the roof beam. After entering the city, Su Fengnian restrained most of his qi activity. Within 100 steps, he was still concerned about Morning Dew, so he went downstairs to eat lunch. The business of the inn was bleak, and there were only a few tables of customers. Su Fengnian ordered a pot of liquor and drank alone. He was relaxed and had a bit of the spirit of a scholar. Before Su Fengnian went to the north, he had a lot of business dealings. Not only were there tea leaves and porcelain, but there were also a lot of antiques, scriptures, and other relics of the spring and autumn period that had been lost among the common people were also sold to Wuhou City and a few other big cities. Before Su Fengnian went to the north, he had some understanding of the 8 great festival holders and the 12 great generals. Helian Wuwei of Shihe province was relatively unknown. He only knew that he was of noble birth in Beimang and was a romantic young man. However, after his family declined, he did not give up on everything. Instead, he turned over a new leaf. After 20 years of military service, his outstanding military service brought glory to his family. His wife died early from illness and he did not remarry, resulting in him having no children. He was completely different from Helian Wuwei, who was known for his military strength and ruthlessness. Other than his ability to lead troops, he could only be regarded as a troublemaker in the imperial court. He was also rarely seen in the Empress's annual spring and winter hunts. Therefore, among the 8 great festival holders, he was the most aloof. Su Fengnian returned to his room. The silk thread was still intact. Other than eating and drinking, he spent his time alone, flipping through the secret saber manual. Perhaps most people who obtained Wang Xinji's martial arts experience would be ecstatic and would quickly browse through it, wishing they could ascend to the first pin realm overnight. Fortunately, Su Fengnian was able to endure. He did not grasp the essence of the move and did not turn to the next page. At this time he was still stuck at the bottleneck of tying the black silk thread. He also did not play any small trick of taking a detour. During the battle at the Dunhuang city gate, Dong Tai, who was about to go out to sea to visit the Immortal Mountain, and Luo Yang, who had the Jianghu innate talent, could be said to be evenly matched. Su Fengnian closed his eyes to feel the battle. After the battle, he stroked the hundreds and thousands of sword scars. He only felt that his heart was full of spirit, but he could not figure out what it was. Su Fengnian was not impatient. He still told himself to proceed step by step. The next day he carried his book and sword and marched to Wuhou City. He ate and walked. The military formation in the city was solemn and orderly. Li Yishan always said that the ability to manage an army was in the smallest detail. Su Fengnian clearly noticed this point from the map of Beimang's military town that was hung in the Tide Listening Pavilion. On the western front bordering Liangmang, Beimang's elite troops were all rushing to the southern border. They looked like they were going to fight to the death with the Bailiang cavalry. On the eastern front between the 2 dynasties, the military strength of both sides was a notch higher. It was just that as they moved northward, their military strength gradually increased. Beimang's eastern border had Dongjin and Juzi prefectures, which were obviously inferior to Shihe Prefecture, which had Kung Bijuan as its foundation. Su Fengnian did not know whether this arrangement, which was better or worse, was intentional or not. He did not know whether it was a deliberate arrangement or an unintentional move that had to do with the temperament and ability of the several preceptors. On the 15th day of the first lunar month, Su Fengnian did not follow the general trend of going to Lei Ming Temple at dawn. Instead, he left the inn at noon when the sun was blazing hot. Lei Ming Temple was located at the intersection of the north and south of the Joyful Spring. It was built against the mountain. The main structure was a 9-story pavilion with multiple eaves. Inside the pavilion was a Buddha statue that was even bigger than the Dunhuang Buddha cave. It was a typical building with a slope on one side of a hard mountain in the western regions. Su Fengnian, who had restrained his qi activity, was sweating all over as he slowly entered the temple. Inside the temple, ancient trees towered to the sky, providing deep shade. He immediately felt refreshed. After burning 3 sticks of incense, he crossed the threshold of the main building. There were a total of 81 windows in the 9-story pavilion, but none of them were open. It was just that on the 4th floor below, several thousand green lanterns were lit. The lanterns were splendid, as if the Buddha's light was shining everywhere. Therefore, the interior of the building did not give people the slightest impression of gloominess. Su Fengnian looked up and saw the Buddha statue of Maitreya, squinting his eyes and looking down at the world. The Buddha statue was so big that it was ranked 3rd in the world. It was built 800 years ago, during the 3rd catastrophe of Buddhism. The Buddha statue had a compassionate face with a gentle outline. One of his hands was placed on his knees, while the other was forming a seal with his index finger raised. This seal was not found in any Buddhist scriptures. Generations of monks were puzzled and argued endlessly. Later dynasties did not make any changes to the Buddha statue itself. They only added new colors and gold. After the empress ascended the throne, she added rich colors to the kasaya. Before entering the temple, Su Fengnian was informed that the longevity lanterns were to be lit. He had to inform the Thunder Temple monk of his name and ancestral home. Regretfully, he could only give up. The building was spacious and empty. Occasionally, a cool breeze would enter the building. The thousands of green lotus longevity lanterns on the 4th floor, from low to high, swayed slightly in order. The scene was not like that of the human world but rather like the pure land of bliss. Pilgrims were not allowed to enter the building to see the Buddha. Even the monks in the temple had to stop at the 4th floor. The Thunder Temple was built 800 years ago. Most of the monks who achieved the Tao stopped at the 6th or 7th floor. Only the emperor could go up to the 8th floor. Even the emperor, who was known as the Emperor of the 9 and 5, had done so. It meant that he had lowered his status in front of the Buddha. Naturally, no one could go up to the 9th floor. Even the Beimang Empress, who had the ambition to unify the world, was no exception. Su Fengnian bowed to the Buddha and was about to leave the building. He was about to go to a nearby sutra pavilion to enjoy the scenery. In a flash, he had a telepathic connection and looked up. He saw a head poking out of the Buddha's palm. The head was looking straight at him with a cold gaze. At this moment, Su Fengnian only felt that it was ridiculous. His strange mood was indescribable. This woman was really audacious. The white-robed Luo Yang. Sitting on the Buddha's palm, she bent over and poked out her head. She was looking at Su Fengnian. Su Fengnian thought that if it was a gentle woman like Huang Baozhuang, she would definitely not dare to be so rebellious. Su Fengnian said to himself, "The devil Buddha has a line?" Thinking of the magnificent scenery of the falling clouds outside Wuhou City, he suddenly had a hint of understanding. However, it slipped away and he did not grasp it. For some reason, Luo Yang, who appeared in the Thunder Temple, did not leave the Buddha's palm. Su Fengnian also did not go up. The two could only look at each other. Then Su Fengnian almost vomited blood. The white-robed Luo Yang seemed to be annoyed by Su Fengnian's cowardice. When her body floated down, her qi surged like a river flowing into the sea. Thousands of longevity lamps were extinguished in an instant. Su Fengnian felt a headache coming on. He cursed in his heart, "What a sin!" Chapter 570. For some reason, there was no one guarding the green lotus lamp in the building. Su Fengnian couldn't care less about this. He found a few fire folds in front of a small niche at the top of the stairs. After lighting them up, he glided backward along the corridor like a fish. Wherever he went, the longevity lamps would light up one after another. The ground floor was once again as bright as day. Su Fengnian hurriedly climbed up the stairs and lit up the second fire fold. He retreated so that he wouldn't extinguish the fire. Intentionally or unintentionally, Su Fengnian's mind was as clear as a lotus pond. After one round, he climbed up the 3rd and 4th floors. As the main culprit, the devil Luo Yang did not feel guilty at all. From the beginning to the end, he watched coldly from the sidelines. She was no longer the empress of Huang Baozhuang, whose name was Mountain Gradually Green. She did not hide her purple eyes, which overflowed with evil intent. Su Fengnian lit up 3,089 longevity lamps. He stopped and looked up at the sitting Buddha. Humans saw everything as ants, but Buddha saw all living things as equals. Burning incense and praying to Buddha, cramming at the Buddha's feet at the last minute, could he really get anything? Would the Bodhisattvas be tired of it? Su Fengyin collected his thoughts and laughed at himself. He was about to go downstairs when the next scene caught him off guard. The devil in white stood in front of the Buddha's feet. She clenched her fist and the flames of nearly 4,000 longevity lamps were pulled by her chi. They instantly left the green lamp bases and flew toward the sitting Buddha. They hovered a few feet away from the stone Buddha's body. The Buddha's body was originally covered with gold powder. Under the illumination of the lamps, it shone brightly, as if the real Buddha had come to the world. What a Buddha's aura! Luo Yang flicked her finger. More than 4,000 lanterns rushed to the top of the 9-story building and exploded near the Buddha's head. Thousands of meteors fell. Su Fengyin was annoyed, but he could only jump over the railing and fly through the air. He kept waving his sleeves to catch as many sparks as he could. He rolled up his sleeves and threw some sparks back into the green lamp bases. The longevity lamps were reignited one by one. However, his strength was not enough. He only managed to light 700 or 800 lamps. After he landed, he went to the small niche and picked up a piece of kindling. He looked at the devil, who turned around with her hands clasped behind her back and looked out of the door. Only then did Su Fengyin feel relieved. He slowly went downstairs and stood beside Luo Yang. She did not beat around the bush and said straightforwardly, "The Zhong family is good at robbing tombs. During the chaos of the Spring and Autumn War, they obtained a bamboo slip from the tomb of King Qian of the Southern Tang dynasty. 800 years ago, the emperor of the Great Qin dynasty was buried in the territory of Shihe province. Lu Gui was proficient in geomancy and geography, so the two families joined hands to open the tomb and steal the treasure. I have no interest in the relics of the Emperor Qin, but I don't like Zhong Liang. Whatever he wants to do, I will not let him do it." Su Fengyin frowned and said, "With your great divine ability as the fourth most powerful person in the world, wouldn't it be fine if you directly killed Zhong Liang? No matter how powerful Zhong Liang is, can he compare to Dong Tai and Hong Jingyan?" Luo Yang's tone was ice cold. "Is it that simple?" Su Fengyin was speechless. "You are the great demon who has single-handedly killed the most people in the world. Back in the day you roamed through the 8 prefectures of Beimang, killing everyone you saw. You killed several thousand people in a spurt of energy, and only stopped when you were stopped by Tuoba in Beimang's imperial city. You could be considered a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, so how could you be so modest now?" However, Su Fengyin did not say this out loud. Facing the blind zither player Xue Songguan was enough for him to risk his life, but facing Luo Yang, even 10 lives would not be enough for her to kill. Su Fengyin also did not dare to treat her as a woman. When they first met in the chess and sword music school, with his outstanding memory, he clearly remembered her appearance and figure. When he saw her again in Dunhuang, he only felt that her face was blurry. It was not simply because Luo Yang's imposing manner made it difficult to distinguish whether she was a man or a woman, but rather because he felt that something was not right. If he wanted to get to the bottom of it, this might be the first time in his life that Su Fengyin was so afraid of a woman. Luo Yang said calmly, "I've been waiting for you here for 2 days." Su Fengyin's face was full of doubt. Luo Yang hesitated for a moment, then said, "Do you know where the mausoleum of the Great Qin dynasty's emperor is hidden?" Su Fengyin held back the sarcastic sarcasm that almost slipped out of his mouth. He grinned and said, "If I knew, I would have taken a hoe to dig up treasures in the grave long ago." Luo Yang walked towards a tall sutra depository with a plaque hanging from it that read, "Buddha comes, Buddha goes." Su Fengyin asked, "Why don't I see the monks of the thunder-rumbling temple?" Luo Yang said lightly, "Before you entered the temple, I was resting on the palm of the Buddha statue. I thought that they were chanting sutras and doing their homework on the wooden fish, so I killed them all." Su Fengyin walked out of the building, and his restrained chi poured out in torrents. The mirage of the great yellow courtyard was lofty, and the sleeves of his long gown fluttered in the wind. Unfortunately, as the saying goes, virtue is 1 foot tall, and the devil is 10 feet tall. Under Luo Yang's suppression, Su Fengyin not only restrained his chi, but also a mouthful of blood surged up his throat. At this moment, Su Fengyin saw monks coming out of the Hall of Great Strength in a line. The way they wore their yellow kasayas was slightly different from the ones in the Central Plains. They looked serene, and when they saw Luo Yang and himself from a distance, they only took them as pilgrims from a wealthy family. Some monks with lower cultivation just glanced at the white-robed Luo Yang a few more times, but did not pay much attention to them. Only then did Su Fengyin realize that the female devil was playing a joke on him. She played him like a monkey and he did not know whether to laugh or cry. After swallowing the mouthful of blood, Luo Yang's words added insult to injury. "How did you enter the Vajra realm with your intellect? I think you just relied on your background as the heir of Bailiang and the fated chance due to your identity. You are petty and have no foresight at all. What a waste of Dong Tai's gift. Su Fengyin did not refute. He comforted himself with the flimsy reason that a good man would not fight with a woman, and at the same time criticized her in his heart. Luo Yang was able to read people's minds. She sneered and said, "You must be comparing me with Li Chungang. You think I'm making fun of your intellect and that it's just the pot calling the kettle black. But in fact, not only am I in the first 3 realms of the first pin, I have also stepped into the Vajra finger and mysterious celestial phenomenon earlier than Li Chungang. Even the Earth Immortal realm is no exception." Su Fengyin said in a low voice without any sincerity, "Yes, yes, yes. Your martial arts are matchless. Tomorrow you will beat Tuoba until he runs away like a rat. The day after tomorrow, you will be beaten by Wang Xinji into a coward. On the 3rd day, you will be able to treat the heavenly tribulation as nothing." Then Su Fengyin flew into the suture depository. He was attacked by Luo Yang. She hit his back with her palm and the mirage collapsed. Firstly, Su Fengyin did not dare to dodge. Secondly, he wanted to estimate Luo Yang's strength. Only Su Fengyin, who was sitting on the stone floor of the pavilion, knew how painful it was. He wiped away the scarlet blood that seeped out of the corner of his mouth and cultivated a sword amidst the pain. After the temperamental Luo Yang entered the pavilion, she did not even look at Su Fengyin and went straight to the top floor. Although it was the suture depository in name, it was actually a 6-story steel pagoda. The wooden stairs spiraled upwards. Luo Yang came to the top floor and looked up at the spring of joy. On the top wall of the pagoda, there were many poems of scholars and poets who enjoyed the scenery. Because the latecomers did not follow the rules, the words were overlapping and changed beyond recognition. Su Fengyin looked around in boredom. He did not see many poems with good charm. They were all the kind that groaned for no reason. However, there were some small songs and sentences that were interesting. For example, the spring breeze in Jiangnan, the sound of the orioles on the ancient trees, and so on. He memorized them one by one in his mind. He wanted to plagiarize them and present them to his second sister, who was known as the best in the literary world. Chapter 571. Su Fengyin accidentally saw half of a poem, so he wiped it away with his palm. Su Fengyin stood by the window and slightly released his qi. His vision gradually became clear, and he began to memorize the layout of the mansion of the joyous spring. As the refugees moved north, they brought with them a wave of south wind blowing north. The courtyard architecture was tainted with the style of the spring and autumn period, which was undoubtedly the most obvious phenomenon. Beimeng was not only the southern dynasty, there were also many noble families in the north who pursued the style of small bridges, flowing water and deep courtyards. Moreover, there was a tendency for the green to surpass the blue. They were well versed in the essence of the southern school's architecture, which was a first-class masterpiece. Naturally, Su Fengyin's understanding of this kind of thing was not limited to a smattering. The winding corridors of the Bailiang Palace on Mount Qingliang used to be a joke in the past. After going through untold hardships to infiltrate the mansion in the middle of the night, several groups of assassins actually wandered around for an entire night in fear and trepidation, yet none of them were able to find Su Xiao or Su Fengyin's courtyard. After being captured, they died with their eyes wide open. These jokes had always been talked about by the servants of the mansion. After Su Fengyin's 2 travels, he could no longer laugh. He still remembered that once he was dragged by Wenhua to peek at a woman from a landowning family whom the wooden sword ranger fell in love with at first sight. Wenhua stood on tiptoe outside the high wall, listening to the beauty laughing on the swing inside the wall. Later, he had no choice but to let Su Fengyin bend down while he stood on his good brother's shoulder. Only then could he be considered to have seen the woman he admired. After being discovered by the guards of the courtyard, they chased after him with sticks and gave him a good beating. Su Fengyin's waist and back were sore. The key point was that every time Wenhua solemnly vowed that he would not marry anyone else, he was unreliable. When he saw a beautiful woman again, he would change his mind at the sight of her and travel together with her. He did not know how many times they had fallen in love at first sight. Su Fengyin could not bear it, and afterward he made a dig at Wenhua, saying that even if he sneaked into the mansion he could not be a flower thief. Luo Yang's words hit the nail on the head. She asked, "Who are you going to the north of the joyous spring to kill? Kill Helian Weiwu? Do you think you can do it? Or do you have a Bailiang spy?" Su Fengyin shook his head. "I'm just going to take a look." Luo Yang's carelessly said, "If you're not careful, you'll be spotted by the devil Zhong, who is ranked after me. Even if you live, you'll lose a few layers of skin." Su Fengyin pretended to be silly and smiled. I don't plan to cause any trouble. I don't have much money on me. I'm just going to steal a few valuable items. Luoyang said calmly, I'll go with you. Su Fengyin immediately refused. Please don't. I'm going to be a thief, not a devil who kills to silence witnesses. Luoyang turned her head and laughed. I won't expose your whereabouts. I'm just curious about what kind of shady business a Bailiang heir is up to. Actually, you know very well that I didn't kill the innocent in Wuhou City, and most likely I won't go to the Joyous Spring to start a massacre. Don't pretend you don't know and treat me like a fool. You'll have to wait until you've reached the celestial phenomenon realm and have the qualifications to fight me. But with your level of comprehension, I don't think it'll be easy for you to reach the resonance of heaven and earth. Su Fengyin was exposed, so he didn't try to hide anymore. He openly looked at the layout of the mansion that stretched across the Joyous Spring. Luoyang suddenly said, How about we ask each other something and we answer each other's questions? Su Fengyin thought for a moment and asked, I'll go first? Luoyang said bluntly, No. You've already asked and I've answered. It's my turn to ask. Su Fengyin felt extremely sullen. Luoyang wasn't the graceful Huang Baozhuang. When had she ever been kind to others, let alone be considerate? She ignored Su Fengyin's gloominess and asked directly, What is your ultimate goal in coming to Beimang? Su Fengyin was silent. Luoyang waited quietly. Su Fengyin rubbed his cheeks. For the first time since he went to the north alone, he spoke softly, to meet an extremely important person. 20 years have passed, and even my father doesn't know if he's still trustworthy. To confirm this, other than Su Xiao and me, the hereditary heir of Bailiang, no one else has the qualifications to verify the answer. If I want to meet him, I have to do something to make him feel that I'm worthy. Otherwise, just being the heir of Bailiang won't be enough. I can't and I don't want to tell you any more inside stories. In any case, I know that if he really does rebel against Beimang and then against Bailiang, I'm destined to die in Beimang on this journey north. Luoyang nodded, satisfied with Su Fengyin's honesty. She said, It's your turn to ask. Su Fengyin asked cautiously, Is Huang Baozhuang really dead? Luoyang didn't answer directly. After skipping the first question, she asked the second one expressionlessly, If you succeed in this gamble, will you be able to secure the position of King of Bailiang in the future? Su Fengyin said unhappily, I still can't. Luoyang laughed coldly. His Royal Highness is so pitiful. Su Fengyin didn't quibble. He asked, What are you going to Aquarius Prefecture for? Luoyang pursed her lips and replied, There's a fish in the northern darkness. Tuoba has been waiting for a weapon for a whole 30 years. I'm going to ruin his good fortune. At the very least, I'm going to fight. First, you had a sword duel with Dong Tai. Then you obstructed the Zhong family's treasure hunt. Now you're going to find trouble with the Beimang military god. Can't you stop for a bit? Su Fengyin was shocked beyond words, but he quickly regained his composure. If Luoyang could be judged with common sense, she wouldn't be the number one person of the demonic path. Luoyang asked a thorny and unlucky question. If you die in Beimang, do you need me to collect your corpse and send it back to Bailiang? Su Fengyin sighed. Then I'll thank you in advance. Luoyang suddenly smiled sweetly. Actually, if I die in Tuoba's hands in the northern ice field, you won't be able to escape either. At that time, whoever dies later will have to collect the corpse. Su Fengyin smiled bitterly. Can't you not fight with Tuoba? You're still young. Won't it be safer if you wait until you're an Earth Immortal? Luoyang's eyes were unfocused. She looked into the distance. Things that I'm confident in are boring. Su Fengyin said softly, It's just that I can't beat you. Otherwise I'd say you're really pretentious. Su Fengyin, who was playing a word game, was soon beaten into the wall. After he landed, he patted the dust off and slowly breathed in and out. He was angry, but he didn't dare to say anything. A strange smile suddenly appeared on Su Fengyin's face as he asked in a low voice, I heard that you killed your way all the way to the northern Mang Imperial Palace. Empress Murong was standing on top of the city walls while you were standing below the city walls. Luoyang seemed to have never thought about this kind of thing. When Su Fengyin thought she was going to let it go, she unexpectedly spat out 3 words slowly. Old woman. Su Fengyin was stunned for a moment, then he laughed out loud. It turned out that when this demoness was mean, she was even scarier than martial arts. Would the Empress of Beimang be angered to death when she heard this? When they went downstairs, Su Fengyin was still secretly laughing. Luoyang asked, What words did you erase on the wall just now? Su Fengyin paused for a moment. It's just something very unlucky. Out of sight, out of mind. Luo Yang didn't have a good temper and patience. Say it. Su Fengyan smiled. The geese have returned, but the people have not returned to the south. Luo Yang turned to him and said softly, pretentious. Chapter 572. In Wuhou City there was a sudden downpour and then a sudden stop. It was like a joke, but Su Fengyan took it as a good omen. Throughout the year there were only a few heavy rains and he just happened to run into it. The heavy rain gradually lessened and finally stopped. Su Fengyan, relying on his clear memory, led Luo Yang, who was dressed in white and wearing white shoes, to walk through a small alley. In the alley, there were groups of children and girls who were in high spirits. They went to the wet wall and flipped over the rubble and stones, grabbing a few water buffaloes with long beards and horns. Su Fengyan did not expect that Shihe province would also have this kind of bug. He thought of many interesting things from his childhood, and his eyes became warmer. The children picked up the water buffaloes and placed them on the steps. They used ropes and strings to tie small stones to the water buffaloes. The little guys walked slowly and the children looked on happily. These children who lived next to each other and could be said to be childhood sweethearts occupied more than half of the alley. Su Fengyan stuck close to the wall and walked around, but Luo Yang directly walked past him and stepped on one of the water buffaloes to death. The owner was a fair and clean girl with goat horns. Seeing the pet she had just obtained die an unnatural death, she was stunned for a moment. She first glanced at Luo Yang, but did not dare to get angry and could only cry loudly. The boys also did not have the courage to stand up for her, and could only stare blankly at the white-clothed elder sister. She was beautiful, but her temper was too bad. Su Fengyan was afraid that this group of children would unintentionally anger the demoness, so he hurriedly signaled to Luo Yang, and then eagerly went to the foot of the wall to get busy. He pulled out 2 water buffaloes and handed them to the girl with goat horns as compensation. The children had simple hearts. What they gained they lost. Happiness and unhappiness came and went in a hurry, so they did not bicker with this pair of elder brother and sister. They slightly distanced themselves from them, playing with the water buffaloes, and gathered together to whisper. Su Fengyan looked at Luo Yang helpless. He thought to himself, could it be that this is what it means to be in the king's company is to be in the tiger's company? He really did not know how the cat Han Diaoxi had survived. Was he called Han Xingxian? Rumor has it that he is good at killing celestial phenomenon experts. I don't know if it's true or not. Does he have a 40% chance of winning against Luo Yang? While Su Fengyan's imagination was running wild, Luo Yang turned the corner of the alley and stopped in front of a stall. Su Fengyan looked up and saw that it was a narrow shop selling roasted mutton noodles. Luo Yang took the lead and sat down. The shop owner was a fat woman, but she looked kind and had a happy personality. Seeing that the young man and woman were both noble, she became even more friendly and began to boast about their mutton noodles, saying that mutton was the tender meat of the forelegs and the waist. Moreover, the ingredients used to moisten the taste were pure and had been passed down for several generations. Su Fengyan smiled and ordered 2 bowls of mutton noodles with water. Although the woman was a businesswoman, she could not hide her kind nature. There was not much meat in the soup, and she even sprinkled a lot of fresh flower peppers and green coriander powder on the noodles. She also handed over 2 fresh green onions. Su Fengyan was full of praise. He did not have much luck with children, but he was indeed talented in dealing with women, especially women. The shop was quiet. The lady boss was sitting at a nearby table laughing non-stop. Su Fengyan ate quickly as well. Luo Yang on the other hand ate slowly. Su Fengyan simply ordered another bowl and paid the bill after eating. There was too much silver and too little copper, so he felt a little guilty. Su Fengyan originally wanted to pay a little more, but the woman was very forthright. He did not know if it was because she had made up her mind to win over these 2 returning customers, or because she missed Su Fengyan's handsomeness, which was completely different from that of a rough man, so she only asked for copper. Before leaving, Su Fengyan said that he would definitely come back for a meal before leaving the city. The lady boss laughed non-stop and even said a few celebratory words about having a son early, which scared Su Fengyan so much that he broke out in a cold sweat. Fortunately, Luo Yang turned a deaf ear and directly left the shop. They leisurely made their way back to the inn. Luo Yang asked for a superior standalone room, and the 2 agreed to meet at midnight. When Su Fengyan returned to the room and saw that everything was fine, he held his breath and concentrated on cultivating his golden lotus. During this period he silently nurtured his sword. It was only until midnight that he began to prepare for his trip to the Spring of Joy. Actually, with Luo Yang accompanying him, there were both pros and cons. The downside was naturally that this devil's temperament was unpredictable, and no one knew what kind of moths she would cause. The upside was that no matter how bad the situation was, Su Fengyin would not be trapped in a deadly situation. Even if Zhong Shintong and Zhong Liang were to join forces, could they defeat the fourth most powerful person in the world, Luo Yang? Deep into the night, Su Fengyin carried the spring and autumn sword and the spring thunder on his belt. He arrived at the courtyard where Luo Yang was staying. She was sitting on the steps looking up at the starry sky. The city walls of Wuhou were high and the sky was low. The scenery was too different from the south. Luo Yang gave him a look and Su Fengyin leaped onto the roof and swept past. He did not need to think about whether Luo Yang could keep up with him. If she could not, Su Fengyin would have long gone to the imperial palace of the Liang dynasty to defecate and piss as he pleased. Luo Yang followed him like a shadow. Su Fengyin took a breath and asked curiously, "Zhong Liang is only the fourth most powerful devil. Why do you say that he's only behind you?" Luo Yang strolled leisurely in the courtyard. Her voice was cold and clear. "Isn't that maid of yours a coward as well? She's only willing to be ranked last." Su Fengyin laughed. "Of course she's not as good as you." Chapter 573. Fortunately, Su Fengyin was no stranger to the military night curfew and the layout of the city defense. Fortunately, Luo Yang was willing to lower herself and follow him stealthily. When they arrived outside the wall of the Zhong family mansion, Su Fengyin chose a secluded corner with sparse lanterns and was about to climb over the wall when Luo Yang pulled him back. She stood up and her body twisted strangely on the wall. Only then did Su Fengyin realize that there was a trick to climbing over the wall. He imitated her and realized that there was a thin silver wire hanging from the top of the wall. Before he climbed over the wall and landed on the ground, he caught a glimpse of Luo Yang floating a few feet away from the wall. Her eyes were filled with mockery. Su Fengyin cursed in his heart. He fixed his gaze and took a deep breath to stop himself from falling. Like a gecko, he slid down the wall. Only then did he manage to avoid the endless mystery. However, she was the only one who could stand on the thin wire without the slightest vibration of the bell. Su Fengyin admitted that he did not have the ability to do so. The main reason was that Beiliang Palace had always been lax on the outside but tight on the inside. Even if they harbored evil intentions, they liked to close the door and beat the dog. In comparison, the Zhong family mansion was much more cautious. It was obvious that they wanted to repel the enemy first so that the enemy would know the difficulty and retreat. They did not want to kill anyone. Perhaps this was also the Zhong family's way of deliberately putting up a low profile in other people's territory. As long as the architecture of the courtyard was the work of a master, there would naturally be laws to be followed. The majestic Beiliang Palace was a collection of great achievements. The Zhong mansion could be considered a first-class style in the Spring of Joy, but compared to the Beiliang mansion which occupied a mountain and called itself the king, it was still not worth mentioning. Su Fengyin walked very leisurely and contentedly. Hearing voices, he circled around the people he met, as if he was taking a stroll in his own home. He led the white-clothed devil around the beams and through the corridors. However, at first he could still sense Luo Yang's presence, but after a quarter of an hour his perception completely disappeared. Su Fengyin was also too lazy to worry about groundless fears and speculate based on his identity. He did not want to go to Zhong Shintong and Zhong Liang's place and invite trouble. He arrived at the elegant courtyard of the distinguished guest, Lu Gue. The closer he got to the main courtyards, the more relaxed the security was. This was also the Zhong family's conceit. Like a swallow returning to its nest, Su Fengyin hung under the eaves that did not reflect his figure. The room was brightly lit, and the golden threads pierced through the small holes in the paper window. He saw a middle-aged man who looked about 60% similar to Lu Qin reading a book at night. His brows were hazy, and there was also an old man dressed in sackcloth sitting opposite him. The old man looked thin, and his 10 fingers were crossed on the table. The most eye-catching thing was that his lips were purple, which was exactly the same as the Beiliang's master Qingshui Yao Jian. It was obvious that this was caused by years of tasting soil and identifying acupoints. It could be seen that the Zhong family's journey to the west was indeed to borrow the Lu family's geomancy technique to explore the mausoleum of the Emperor Qin. The old man in sackcloth had an exquisite brass lamp in his hand. Both he and Lu Gue were deeply worried, but they did not rejoice at the prospect of opening the mausoleum and getting a share of the loot. Su Fengyin could still be considered somewhat understanding. When it came to the mausoleum of the Emperor Qin, the mausoleum of the Emperor of the mortal world, the technique of mechanisms was only a small matter. What was more troublesome was the contamination of fate energy. If the Yin energy was too heavy, not only would the people who entered the mausoleum temporarily die after obtaining the treasures temporarily, it was likely that they would also bring disaster to several generations of their descendants. The brass lamp was also known as the ventilation lamp. It contained the essence and blood of a child. Once it was lit, it could be used to ward off the yin energy. The old man in the house sighed, 36 lamps are still too few. The divination also shows that the odds are against us. Lu Gui looked tired and said helplessly, things happened in a hurry. Where can we get enough lamps for the great Zhou dynasty? The old man sneered, the Zhong family is boorish and arrogant. How would they know the knowledge behind this? It's not something that can be matched by human strength. Lu Gui said softly, the walls have ears. The old man laughed involuntarily, Master, the Zhong brothers still have the breadth of mind. Lu Gui shook his head, it's better to be safe than sorry. In front of great wealth, everyone is narrow-minded. At this point the old man did not say anything else. His 10 fingers gently stroked the brass lamp with the carved Buddha statue. Although he was born poor, he had great skills. Since he was young, he had learned how to make Buddha from an unknown Buddhist master. It was only after that Buddhist master passed away that he was valued. He was known as the ancestor of the revival of Dunhuang Buddha Cave. After his death, he was posthumously conferred the title of Abbot of the whole mountain. He was especially good at making guanyin statues. Although the old man was not a monk, he was ingenious. His Buddha statue did not stick to the guanyin. It was said that the 10,000 Buddhas were in the heart, 32 faces, good for light and good for 80 kinds of good. The chi-exchanging lamp was his creation. According to the precepts of the king's scripture, if the Buddha statue was not as good as the Dharma, even if the Buddha Bodhisattva was consecrated by the eminent monk, they would not come to receive the Buddha. In layman's terms, the common folk only knew that it was not easy to invite the Buddha, but they did not know how difficult it was. In fact, if the Buddha statue was not as good as the Dharma, the real Buddha would not come. Therefore many places of worship were not blessed by the Dharma. And many places of worship were full of evil. This led to the Buddha statue not being effective, and the prayers not being fulfilled. This was the reason why the Buddha statue was not as good as Dharma. Especially this brass lamp. At first glance, it was not eye-catching, but upon closer inspection, it was like a new moon, full of charm. It could be considered the highest achievement of the old man in hemp. If it were not for his lamp, no matter how good Lu Gui was in feng shui, he would not have dared to come to Xia province. Lu Gui raised his cup and took a sip of wine. He said slowly, it is recorded on the bamboo slip that Emperor Qin mobilized tens of thousands of people to cut off the river and dug a mausoleum on the mountain wall above the water. After sealing it, he opened the gate and released the river water. The people and nearly 1,000 supervisors were all killed by the imperial guards. The ingenuity of the acupoint construction technique and the ruthlessness of the method of hiding the truth are unprecedented. This is what an emperor should do. Lu Gui continued, if we want to reopen the mausoleum of the Emperor Qin, we have to collude with the preceptor Helian Weiwu. Otherwise, how can we do such a huge project of cutting off the river? As for how the Zhong family persuaded this stubborn old man, we don't know. That's good. One less secret, one less trouble. Su Fengyin, who was hanging under the eaves, frowned. 800 years ago, in the mausoleum of the Qin Emperor, Li Zhu, the Empress of the Great Qin Empire, and the white-robed Luoyang who spat out pearls. Why did it feel like they were about to become one? Was Luoyang, whose pearl of the pearl was destroyed by Dong Tai, trying to ruin the Zhong family's good deed, or was she trying to accomplish her own good deed? Su Fengyin, who was helping the evildoer, was worried. Chapter 574. The old man in hemp clothes left the courtyard with the brass Buddhist lamp. Lu Gui stayed up late at night to read an old edition of the geography book he had asked for from the Xia province government. Stealing the emperor's mausoleum was a big deal. If he wanted to get into the details, he had to at least have a clear view of the overall situation. It was already late at night, but there were still guests. Su Fengyin restrained his qi and did not move. When the young master and servant knocked on the door, he easily recognized them. They were Zhong Gui's elder brother, Zhong Tan. This eldest son of the Zhong family was followed by a personal maid who could not even be called average. She had a plump figure, but her appearance was not pleasing to the eye. With the Zhong family's wealth, it was unpredictable to find such a woman as a maid. Su Fengyin paid attention to her and took a few more glances at her. He remembered many details that ordinary people would not pay attention to, such as the small sachet on her waist that was used to remove impurities and the embroidered pattern of a woman dressed as a pipa. It left a deep impression on Su Fengyin. The maid seemed to be hesitating whether to follow her master into the house, so she paused for a moment. Zhong Tan, who was carrying 2 pots, seemed to be careless, but in fact he was very careful. He shouted, "Lu Sibu, sorry to disturb you. I know you are a glutton. Come, try the drunken crab that I begged from next door. The wine is the local Yellow River honey wine brewed by the local method. The yellow crab's flavor is different from that of the Central Plains. By August or September it will be too old to eat. Now is the best time to drink the wine." While speaking, he pulled the maid and entered the quiet house hand in hand with her, regardless of whether the head of the Lu family, Lu Sibu, agreed or not. With a pot of wine and a jar of drunken crab, Zhong Tan entered the house and hurriedly opened the lid of the pot, as if he was presenting a treasure. Even Su Fengyin could smell the tantalizing aroma that assailed his nostrils. He sighed that this Zhong family's son really knew how to enjoy life. Lu Gui stood up with a smile and crossed the threshold to welcome him. The Lu family and the Zhong family had been friends for generations. Although he was an elder in the southern dynasties, the Lu family had always been seen as a branch attached to the Zhong family's great tree. Lu Gui was the great general Zhong Shintong's echo and was ridiculed as a scholar serving the imperial court. At this moment, Lu Gui's eagerness showed just how much confidence Lu Gui had. However, Zhong Tan had always been smooth and slick. Since Lu Gui gave him face, he didn't blindly put on the airs of the Gaohua family's son. He entered the study, took the bowls and sauces from the maid, and began to do the work of a servant. Lu Gui casually pushed the books on the table away and jokingly said, old glutton, virtuous nephew is making fun of uncle for being old." Zhong Tan slapped his forehead and said, "The term old glutton is really asking for a beating. Uncle Lu Sibu is the #1 eater in the southern dynasty. He once wrote the Su Pian. Even Her Majesty laughed and said that Lu Sibu was worthy of the title of clear glutton in our dynasty. Compared to the title of old glutton, clear glutton is much more elegant." Lu Gui had a gratified smile on his face regarding the Empress's bestowal of clear glutton. It would be impolite to refuse, but he wasn't modest and wasn't in a hurry to eat. He lowered his head and bent over to smell the aroma of the drunken crab on the plate. He was intoxicated by it. Then he raised his head to look at the woman's waist and clicked his tongue in wonder. Miss Daigu's scented sachet is the new clear agarwood, which has become an excellent seasoning. The aroma of wine, the aroma of crab, and the fragrance of agarwood. The woman's face didn't show any flattery or shyness. She said calmly, "You flatter me. It's Lu Daogu who has made a fool of herself." This woman was Zhong Tan's weak spot. Praising her was much more effective than praising him. However, when people flattered him, they either praised Maid Lu's countenance as a flower, or said that she was like a hibiscus. They didn't hit the nail on the head and would only annoy Zhong Tan. Her realm was far inferior to Lu Gui's. Without needing Zhong Tan to open his mouth, Lu Gui invited the woman to taste the exotic drunken crab together. Just as Zhong Tan had said, the taste of the summer crabs salvaged from the Yellow River wasn't inferior to the lake crabs from the Central Plains. With one hand holding a wine cup and the other holding a crab leg, Lu Gui ate slowly and with relish. When Lu Daogu poured the wine, some of it spilled on the table. She used her slender hand to slowly wipe it away. Zhong Tan didn't mind this kind of harmless detail. He looked at Lu Gui and said with a smile, "Uncle Lu, this little nephew took the liberty of visiting you this time to pass on a message to Helian Weiwu. The reason this Ji Ling is willing to hand over this jar of drunken crab is because he admires Uncle's wild handwriting. That's why he brought you the wine, wanting Uncle to borrow the strength of the wine to write some calligraphy. The Ji Ling said it's okay to write whatever you want, but he still wants to guess what you've written." Lu Gui pointed at Zhong Tan and teased, You're just a common person. How can you compare to the rice girl who's pure and clean to the bone?" Zhong Tan laughed out loud and said, I don't deny it. After eating the crab and drinking the wine, Lu Gui also wrote a piece of calligraphy. It was incomparably sloppy. Nearly 20 words were written smoothly in one go, showing off his ability. Zhong Tan was a rascal and couldn't recognize a single word. However, after asking about the content, he found out that it was 1 or 2 merits that benefit the people, far surpassing the 8 or 9 moral essays, close to a saint. This sentence obviously had the suspicion of flattery. However, Lu Sibu's calligraphy skills and noble status were all there. If this piece of calligraphy was given out, as he said to Xianxia earlier, Lu Gui, Zhong Tan, and Helian Weiwu would all be happy. Moreover, Lu Gui was originally a scholar who wrote moral essays. He belittled himself to elevate the Ji Ling of Shihe province, who was a martial artist. He didn't hesitate to use the 4 words, close to a saint, to comment on it. It could be said that he had read a brilliant knowledge. Chapter 575. When Su Fengyin and the woman stepped through the door and walked towards the courtyard, Su Fengyin did not look at the backs of the man and woman. Instead, he stared straight at the window to observe the changes in Lu Gui's expression. When he saw Lu Gui looking at the window with a hint of nervousness, Su Fengyin knew that something was wrong. At that time, the maidservant poured the wine carelessly with her back to him and used her fingers instead of her sleeves to smear the wine. Su Fengyin was suspicious. Although he was not sure how she knew about his whereabouts, when he thought about Lu Gui's strange behavior, Zhong Tan was most likely going to call for someone to reel in the net. Su Fengyin had no interest in being a drunk crab. The spring and autumn struck first to gain the upper hand. In an instant, his chi was vast and mighty like the Milky Way pouring down from top to bottom. As expected, Zhong Tan only turned around to watch. The maidservant with a vulgar name struck first. Her slender hands were as sharp as the Milky Way pouring down from top to bottom. As expected, Zhong Tan only turned around to watch. The maidservant with a vulgar name struck first. Her slender hands were as sharp as the Milky Way, and she could kill with just a light lift of her hand. Unexpectedly, Zhong Tan only turned around to watch. The maidservant with a vulgar name struck first. Her slender hands were as sharp as the Milky Way, and she could kill with just a light lift of her hand. She actually had the demeanor of a grandmaster. Su Fengyin had tirelessly studied the saber manual on the road to the north. In addition to the sharpening of many life and death battles, his saber technique had reached perfection. The spring and autumn sword bent at an angle, and instead of retreating, she attacked with her fingers like a whetstone. Instead of retreating, the spring and autumn sword moved up and down 30 times in an instant. Su Fengyin did not think that he had underestimated this strange woman, but still underestimated her skills. He pulled out his sword and retaliated. Sparks flew in all directions. Since Su Fengyin's strike failed, he put his sword back into its scabbard and prepared to engage in close combat. He did not expect the woman to be so unforgiving. She took a series of small steps that were pleasing to the eye. The courtyard was windless and her sleeves fluttered. Ever since Su Fengyin started practicing the saber manuals and sword manuals that he had read could be piled up into a small mountain. As for the rest of the manuals, he could only be considered average. Since the woman was an outer sect martial artist, she also knew a few techniques of the Xingyi Dragon Claw. The servant girl was at a disadvantage. Zhong Tan was still interested. He laughed and said, "You're quite interesting. You're just like me. You don't look at the face. You're both handsome and confident young masters. Once you look at the face, women who like pretty boys will be disappointed. Could it be that you're my long-lost brother? This hero, what's your name? Why don't you tell me? If you accidentally die later, it would be too much of an injustice." Before Su Fengyin left the inn, he changed his face into a ferocious-looking bearded man. He looked like a fearsome warrior from the thunder-rumbling temple, which was very different from his previous image of a refined scholar. This girl's scratching really meant a lot. Su Fengyin was too lazy to continue fighting. He swung his sword in a rocking stance, his momentum like a rainbow. Zhong Tan's expression finally changed slightly. He took a step forward, causing a large crack to appear on the ground. Su Fengyin swung his sword halfway and retreated. He leaped over the wall of the courtyard. Then, with a few leaps, he disappeared into the night. He continued to move stealthily. This was also in line with the style of an assassin. If the first attack failed, then retreat. Zhong Tan shook his head to stop Lu Daogu's pursuit. He blew a sharp whistle, and the entire mansion was suddenly brightly lit. The servants lit lamps and hung cages. The soldiers donned armor and held spears. The men of sacrifice chose a place to hide. There was no panic at all. It could be seen that Zhong Tan was accustomed to governing his family using the military method. Zhong Tan stretched his body and laughed. "This guy is probably the one who killed Zhong Gui. He's really powerful. You're born from the princess's tomb's unique calligraphy technique, but you didn't get the upper hand. It would be strange if Zhong Gui didn't die." He glanced inside the room and sneered. Lu Gui must be a coward. Which scholar who became an official wasn't afraid of death? Lu Daogu's expression was grave. She bit her lip and said, "This person's strength is close to the first rank." Zhong Tan said calmly, "If the sky falls, there's a tall person to hold it up. Do you think my father and uncle are decorations? Let's not worry about this. If he dares to run around, he'll die sooner or later. Not to mention close to the first rank, even if he's a genuine finger Xian, he'll still die." The girl asked softly, "Then what about this Lu Gui's cursive calligraphy?" Zhong Tan shook the ink on the calligraphy and painting. He said, "Forget it. It's a mess. I won't cause trouble for the head of festival. I'll send it tomorrow. Zhong Tan left the courtyard with a mischievous smile. He was still in a good mood. He shouted, 6 yellow crabs. Wash and drain. 1 jean and 2 jeans of good salt. Put it in the pot and let it cool. Lu Daogu followed quietly behind him. She smiled but didn't say anything. The Southern dynasty prioritized famous scholars, then focused on agriculture and light on commerce. But Lu Gui and these scholarly officials aren't businessmen in the end. They're just selling the goods in their stomachs. Hey, can they pretend to be virtuous? Bah. I can fight hundreds of great scholars like him who are well-read and proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Zhong Sandalwood kept muttering without restraint. The maidservant couldn't help but laugh. She said softly, young master, don't forget that you're a scholar who almost became the top scholar. Zhong Tan, who was walking in front, suddenly realized. He blushed with shame and said, I was talking about it and forgot. Su Fengyin didn't continue to stay in the Zhong mansion. The moment before the Zhong family's power was about to come to an end, he chose the lesser of the 2 evils and climbed over the wall to the mansion next door. The mansion was very big and the decorations were very simple. It was so plain that it didn't look like the residence of a ruler at all. Compared to the extravagant neighbors who often used red sandalwood and gold thread cedar as fir wood, it was like comparing a poor old farmer with a rich man who had nothing but 4 walls. It was really embarrassing. Su Fengyin couldn't help but feel a little sentimental. The Bailiang cavalry was undoubtedly the most powerful in the world. However, after Su Shao became the king of Bailiang, especially when the Bailiang army's new recruits were replaced with old soldiers, many of the old generals probably felt that they had no hope of ascending to the throne. Since they couldn't become the founder of the country, they could only occupy a small piece of land and become a small local emperor under the rule of the second emperor, Su Shao. Joining the army in troubled times, especially the soldiers of the Bailiang army, were like wolves and tigers. They were no better than the bandits in the Zhongyi stronghold who wielded their sabers and slaughtered the common people. Not many of them started out with the intention of helping the people. Who didn't want to live a good life first and then win glory for their ancestors. Once they were rich and stable, they thought that everything would be settled once and for all. As for the crimes of the old generals under his command, as long as they didn't go overboard, Su Shao would turn a blind eye to them. He would occasionally give them a warning so that they wouldn't lose face and disappoint the people. His second sister, Su Weisheng, had repeatedly tried to persuade him, but Su Shao had always dismissed her with a smile. In the end, he had waited for more than 10 years. Before Su Weisheng had gone to Shangyin Academy to study, he had stood up for Su Fengyin's younger brother, Su Fengyin. He had angrily told Su Shao that he should either drink a cup of wine and give up his military power, or he should simply be vicious and merciless. If he wanted to learn the vicious arts of the emperor, he should pull out the thorns in his hands as early as possible. The sooner he acted, the better. If he acted any later, the thorns would be deeply rooted in the Su family's family business, which would be passed on to the next generation. But Su Shao continued to smile and say nothing. It was no wonder that he was both happy and afraid every time his second sister returned to Bailiang. His second daughter's honest advice was jarring to the ear, and it gave the king of Bailiang a headache. Su Fengyin sighed inwardly as he quietly made his way into the magistrate's mansion. The night curfew here was sparse, and there was no hidden killing intent. It was truly relaxed from beginning to end. From another point of view, this was more like a home, not a disguised military camp. Then Su Fengyin saw 2 old friends by the lake. One was very old, the other was very new. Even the strong-willed Su Fengyin was a little flabbergasted when he saw this pair of unexpected people. The very old one was an old friend who had met in a foreign land. He had white hair and a blade. As for the relatively new one, he was no longer selling melons and had come to the magistrate's mansion to fish. Chapter 576. Being in a foreign land and surrounded by danger, there was nothing more delightful than seeing an old friend again. Sweet Potato was like this, and so was the white-haired old man. Unfortunately, Su Fengyin did not have the time to be happy. The old man he had released from the bottom of Tide Hark Lake made a fool of himself. His 2 snow-white blades, nailed into his shoulder blades, flew recklessly towards Su Fengyin. Previously, Lu Daogu of the Seed Mansion had used the skill of a woman's embroidery, but when it came to the old man, it was like splashing ink. For a moment, the inner mansion's lakeside stirred up a storm. The fish that had bitten into the old farmer's bait sensed the ripples and fled with their tails wagging. Su Fengyin did not bother to explain himself. For the time being, he pretended to be weak. Then he suddenly exerted his strength and combined it with the swimming fish style he had learned from the herd of buffaloes. He used the Husong paddle that he had secretly learned to scatter a series of swift and fierce blade strikes. Then he suddenly leaped up and used the Immortal's touch on the head to smash the white-haired old man, who had been accumulating strength all this time, into the ground. The old man bent his knees and stood in the pit. He was not angry but happy. His old face beamed with joy. He was a man so old that he had become a wily old man. Naturally, he knew the severity of the situation. It was inappropriate for him to speak in a loud and heroic manner. He only clicked his tongue and said, "His Royal Highness is really something. Even without using his blade, he has 20 to 30% of this old man's strength." Su Fengyin smiled wryly and said, "Grandpa Chu, you flatter me." The old man jumped out of the pit and put his arm around Su Fengyin's neck. There was not the slightest hint of unfamiliarity. "You're too kind. You've made great progress, kid. This old man can be considered half your master. It's comfortable to look at him." Su Fengyin grimaced, but he did not have the nerve to refute. The fisherman, who had been ignored, was calm. He did not even look in their direction. He was very tactful but unreasonable. The white-haired old Kuei could not hold back his words. He pulled Su Fengyin to sit by the lake and told him everything in one breath, revealing many shocking inside stories. "This old man is the disciplinary officer of the West River State. His name is Helian Weiwu. Like me, he is also a guest of the princess's tomb. However, we have different styles. He is more scholarly while I am more martial arts. This old man knows that you're full of tricks and are not straightforward. So I won't keep you in suspense. Just listen to me. It's up to you to believe it or not. Years ago, when Su Xiao led 200,000 soldiers to this place, Helian Wuwei was not skilled in martial arts and was careless in his command of troops. He was almost killed by a fat pig named Chu. It was Su Xiao who let him go, which is equivalent to saving his life. Even if old man Helian knows your identity, he won't make things difficult for you. You can eat, drink and sleep well here. However, the maids in the residence are not very good looking and most of them are old. If you're really bored, you can make do with it after the lights are out. As for why this old man went to fight with Jianghu Huang and was imprisoned at the bottom of the lake, let's not talk about it. It's not something to be proud of. As for how this old man became a foreign official of the princess tomb, there are rules. I can't talk about it." Helian Wuwei finally interrupted. He first smiled warmly at Su Fengyin, then glared at his old friend who he had known for half his life. He sneered mercilessly, "Why can't you talk about it? You're just a lecher with poor eyesight. When you saw a girl in the princess tomb, you drooled over her beautiful buttocks. In the end, you couldn't force yourself on her. Instead, you were beaten down by an old woman and became a prisoner. You shamelessly gave yourself the title of foreign official. There have only been 6 foreign officials in the princess tomb in the past 300 years. The first 5 are dead and the 6th is sitting right next to you. What are you talking about? You're just trying to save face. If it weren't for the fact that your shoulder blades were nailed into your blades and you were forced to abandon the sword and practice the blade, you wouldn't have achieved what you have today even if you walked on the wrong path of the sword for 10 lifetimes." The old man didn't expose his friend's shortcomings out of anger. Instead, he sat down cross-legged and looked at the lake. He murmured, "What a good girl." Helian Weiwu sneered, "If you can still say the same thing when you look at her now, I'll be convinced." The old man laughed, "You're already so old. Old men and old women who are about to die. There's no need to see her. Just keep the good memories of the past." Su Fengyin stood up and performed the etiquette of a junior. Respectfully and reverently he said, "Su Fengyin greets Governor Helian." Helian Weiwu didn't put on airs. He put the fishing rod aside and waved his hand, "No need for formalities. We met outside the city. You and I have similar words and temperaments. It's good that we can be friends despite our age difference. If you still can't let go, you and I can call each other uncle and nephew." The old man was surprised. "Helian, old man, I've never seen you speak so nicely to any younger generation before. What? Just because this kid is Su Zhao's eldest son, you want to pave the way for him to defect to the enemy and commit treason?" Helian Weiwu scolded, "Bullsh *T. Su Fengyin had a headache when he saw someone in white walking on the lake. However, when he saw the behavior of the 2 old men beside him, he was completely confused. The dignified Beimang Shiha province's county governor patted his sleeves and stood up from the small bamboo stool. He folded his hands over his abdomen and put on a respectful look to welcome the guest. Although the old man was somewhat reluctant, he still knelt on the ground with his hands on the ground. He said in a low muffled voice, "The guilty slave of the Princess Grave greets the great idea." Chapter 577. The Princess Tomb was one of the top 5 sects in Beimang, on par with giants like the chess and sword music school in Mount Tibbing. It was very mysterious and had been passed down for 800 years. It had almost no contact with the outside world. Su Fengnian had only learned from the Tide Listening Pavilion's secret scrolls that the princess tomb was divided into two groups. The Flying Immortal Dance of Dun Huang, taught by Sweet Potato, originated from the Flying Immortal painting of colorful clothes in the princess tomb. Su Fengnian would never associate the devil Luo Yang with the princess tomb, let alone the identity of the princess tomb. In Su Fengnian's original impression, Luo Yang was the kind of celestial being who came out of nowhere. She was all alone in the world and lived a lonely life without a grave or a place to mourn after her death. The atmosphere was strange after Luo Yang's arrival. She bent down to pick up Helian Weiwu's fishing rod, changed the bait and swung the rod into the lake. The old farmer, whose other identity was the guest of the princess tomb, was respectful but not afraid. He sat back on the stool and turned his head with a smile. Fengnian, let me ask you. What is the princess tomb? Su Fengnian shook his head. He did not know. Helian Weiwu said slowly, the princess tomb is the tomb of the youngest daughter of the founding emperor of the Great Qin dynasty. The father and daughter were buried together in different tombs. The women of the princess tomb were all guardians of the tomb. Su Fengnian asked doubtfully, the Qin empress's mausoleum is in dragon waste state? Helian Weiwu turned his head and glanced at Luo Yang. Then he chuckled and said, these are the secrets of the imperial palace that cannot be brought to the table. Do you want to hear them? Su Fengnian did not treat himself as an outsider. Just now in the mansion next door, I accidentally became the assassin who tried to assassinate Lu Sibu and the young master of the Zhong family. I smelled Uncle's secret Yellow River drunken crab. How about drinking it with wine? Helian Weiwu kicked the old man, the last few jars of drunken crab were all hidden by you. Go go go. Give it to me. The old man scratched his head of white hair and stood up abruptly. His twin sabers and chains clanked. Not long after, he returned with a few jars and threw them to Helian Weiwu and Su Fengnian. However, the latter's jar in the air was snatched by the woman of hand in the air. She tore the oil paper jar of the oil paper and didn't even tear the crab. She only of the wine down. When a man talked about a woman, especially a woman with a story, his saliva would always splatter everywhere. The three men, one a high-ranking official, one a mysterious Bailiang heir, and one a wandering Jianghu machete man, talked about the Li family and the Wang family like a woman. It was very low class. Helian Weiwu said vaguely, I heard from my elders that the woman that the Emperor Qin liked was killed by the jealous Qin empresses. The emperor took the woman to the watchtower of Mount Li in private and said that I will rule the world. Finally, I can love the beauty and not the country. I don't know how these words of love entered the empress's ears. The next day the woman was killed and the woman was pregnant with a dragon fetus. This made the Emperor Qin furious. Ignoring the objections of his officials, he issued a secret edict that forbade the empress to be buried in the same grave after death. Later, Qin empresses died of depression. The Emperor Qin seemed to feel guilty, so he gave the pearl to the empress, who had accompanied him to conquer the country, and let her carry the pearl into the coffin. Su Fengnian said recklessly, and then it was snatched away by Luo Yang? The old man smiled strangely. Helian Weiwu paused and joked, if you want to know the answer, you can ask her yourself. Su Fengnian had nothing to lose. He said, hey, how did you become the great idea of the princess grave? Luo Yang stared straight at the lake, waiting for the fish to take the bait. She coldly replied, do you want to die? Su Fengnian smiled awkwardly. The old man gloated and added insult to injury, boy, you're a disgrace to men. Luo Yang swung the rod. There was no fish on the hook. She had fished up a whole lake. What a big lake. As a result, even the old man kept quiet out of fear. Luo Yang threw the rod into the lake and got up to leave. She still had the demeanor of a mysterious master. Helian Weiwu smiled and said, this great idea is good in all aspects, but her temper. The old man did not continue to explain, leaving a lingering impression. He changed the topic and explained, a few years ago the Zhong family bought a piece of land a few thousand miles away from the Yellow River. This time they used the excuse of changing the river to make the poor land into good land. If I wasn't a guest of the princess grave, I would have been deceived by them. Zhong Shentong promised to ship 200,000 pounds of ironware to Shihe province within 5 years and sell it to Kung Bijuan at a low price. For me this is a bait that I have to bite. The devil Zhong Liang is the lover of the princess grave's little idea. Not only that, this time Hong Jingyan's shadow was also hidden in the river robbery. This person is very scheming and ambitious. The whole Beimang Jianghu probably can't satisfy his appetite. The reason why the great idea was able to swallow the pearl was because he had the evil intention of letting the great idea cultivate the pearl. Fortunately, there's no one in the world who can predict everything. Hong Jingyan missed the great idea's realm. When the pearl ripened, not only did he not take away the great idea's realm, but he also lost and almost suffered from qi deviancy derangement. Su Fengnian sighed and said, "Why does it sound like Hong Jingyan is more terrifying than Tuoba?" Helian Weiwu nodded and said, "Tuoba and Su Xiao are the same kind of people. Even if you lose to them you'll be convinced. Hong Jingyan is different. His character is very treacherous, so you can't let your guard down. This person went to the Liangmang border with the copper man holding the plate some time ago. On the surface he fought with Qin Jibao, but who knows what happened inside." Su Fengnian looked at the lake that was gradually becoming calm like a mirror. He felt suffocated as if a storm was coming. The old man suddenly said, "Kid, do you know that the dragon tree monk of the two Zen temples went to Dao's sect and sat in front of the heavenly gate for 3 days and 3 nights? How pitiful, he was beaten by Qilin Immortal for 3 days." Su Fengnian was worried and sick at heart. "Is the old abbot dead?" The old man shook his head and said, "Not yet. The Buddha's diamond body is really amazing. But I don't think he can hold on for much longer. In this battle between the Taoist head and the Buddha head, I think the old monk is more likely to lose." Su Fengnian knew very well that although it looked like the Taoist head had killed the Buddha head, it was actually the Taoist head destroying the Buddhist sect. Helian Weiwu laughed and said, "I've seen the old monk's bodhisattva lowering eyebrows. I wonder if I'll be able to see the white-robed monk's diamond glaring eyes next." Su Fengnian thought of the East and West ladies and the North and South little monks. Chapter 578. After the assassination in the Zhong mansion, everything in the mansion was still in order. General Zhong Shentong didn't even show up. Only Zhong Liang stood in Lu Gui's courtyard for a while and asked the maid Lu Daogu a few questions casually. He then glanced at the ground that was affected by the sword qi without any serious expression. Seeing the tall and sturdy Zhong Liang, Lu Gui sighed in relief. Although he didn't like this person's rebellious behavior when he was young, sometimes he felt lucky that he wasn't the enemy of the second son of the Zhong family. In Lu Sibu's eyes, Zhong Liang's behavior was absurd and unfathomable. When he and his peer Zhong Shentong were still studying hard at home, the young Zhong Liang had already killed many people. It was said that he went to the princess's tomb before reaching the age of 20, so he missed the ceremony. Later, when he got married, the bride was carried into the Zhong mansion in a sedan chair with 8 carriers, but the groom was nowhere to be seen. His misdeeds made the old master of the Zhong family so angry that he fumed with anger. When the old master died, Zhong Liang didn't even get to see him. Lu Gui felt relieved not only because he saw the devil Zhong Liang in the mansion, but also because he didn't know. He had heard about Zhong Gui's sudden death from his daughter Lu Qin, but he didn't believe it at all. However, right after Zhong Gui's death, there was a brilliant assassin who openly entered the mansion to target Zhong Tan, which indirectly proved Lu Chen's words. This was great news for the Lu family. Fortune and misfortune came hand in hand. His daughter's disfigurement, Ming Hun, and entering the Emperor Qin's mausoleum would give the entire Lu family a generous reward once they returned to the southern dynasty. Lu Gui thought of his poor daughter and said something contradictory. "It's a pity she's a daughter, but fortunately she's a daughter." In Helian Wuwei's family, the only thing that was worthy of the title of the commandant was probably the spring water into the mansion to make a lake. It was late at night, but he didn't feel sleepy. Without Lu Yang's presence, the 3 men were talking enthusiastically. They were all rough people and seldom talked about the classics. After talking, Su Fengnian knew that in the eyes of the commandant of Helian Wuwei, Qin Jibao was worthy of being called a commander among the 6 adopted sons of Su Xiao. However, for the next 2 generals who were slightly inferior, Chu Lushan actually talked about the fat man who brought shame to the commandant of Helian Wuwei's army before Yuan Zuozong. The commandant of Helian Wuwei, who held the power of a province, didn't hold a grudge. On the contrary, he didn't hide his admiration for Chu Lushan. He said that Chu Lushan's management of the army was strict and he was especially good at leading a lone army deep into the hinterland of certain death. He was truly a lucky and fierce general who had fought hundreds of battles on the battlefield. Because of his age, Su Fengnian missed the national wars during the spring and autumn period. As for Chu Lushan, he only remembered his smiling white and tender fat face. He was so bloated that his eyes and neck couldn't be seen. It was hard to imagine him leading an army to break through the enemy lines. Today, after hearing Helian Wuwei's praise, he suddenly realized that if Chu Lushan really rebelled, it seemed that there would be endless troubles in the future compared to Yuan Zuozong secretly supporting Qin Jibao. Helian Wuwei drank a mouthful of wine. His face was red and his skin wrinkled like pine grain. He looked more like an old farmer. I've heard of some gifted sons of aristocratic families who practiced martial arts and eventually became masters. I've never heard of a son of a feudal lord who could achieve great things. The white-haired old man said, "This kid is lucky to have Jianzhu Huang and Li Chungang as his masters. If this old man had a tide listening pavilion when he was young, I'm sure he would have reached level 1 before the age of 18. With the guidance of a master, he would have reached the finger mystery realm before the age of 30. Helian Wuwei squinted. If you were the heir of Bailiang, you would have been reincarnated 18 times. The old man glared at him. Helian Wuwei was not afraid of his demonstration and was too lazy to pay attention. Su Fengyan laughed at himself. It's just good luck. Taoism says that from the time of conception, a man's innate talent is based on 8. After the age of 78 or 56, there is no vitality left. Only the acquired qi is left. That's why rich old people, when they are old, believe in Huang Lao and seek immortality. It's often an extravagant hope. They can only slightly prolong their life. Practicing martial arts is very important before the age of 8. If one doesn't work hard before the age of 16, it's almost impossible to become a master. When I was young, I wanted to become a top swordsman or a first-class swordsman. But it was delayed. Later it was because I went to Wudong Mountain and was taught by Master Wang. Later on, my realm climbed rapidly. In the end, those who rely on themselves are few. Those who rely on their family background are many. Helian Wuwei shook his head. I don't like to hear that. I've been there and I know how difficult it is. The white-haired old man finally spoke some words of conscience. Actually, you have some tenacity. This old man is embarrassed to deny it. But let me pour cold water on you. In this lifetime, you won't be able to catch up to those monsters. Helian Wuwei scolded, You're the one who talks the most nonsense. Su Fengyan laughed. When it comes to martial arts, it's better to practice it first. The old man was stunned. He muttered, He's the same as Jianzhu Huang. Su Fengyan acted as if he didn't hear that. He asked a key question. Uncle Helian, did you agree to intercept the river and let the Emperor Qin's mausoleum surface and see the light of day again? Helian Wuwei narrowed his eyes and drank. He pondered for a long time. Then he slowly said, Originally this old man didn't want to bite the bait. Later, when the big idea came to the mansion, I changed my mind. Who is the cicada, the mantis, the oriole, or the slingshot? It's up to the heavens. Su Fengyan suddenly laughed. Uncle Helian, I want to learn from you about managing the army and politics. Whatever I can learn is still a little bit. The old head of discipline said frankly, I won't hide it. I don't have a son or a daughter. It's not easy for me to save up some ink and knowledge. I can't take it all to the grave. I'll say it first. If you really want to learn, you have to come with me. I don't know much about books and I'm not willing to teach you. Su Fengyan smiled and nodded. The old man muttered, You officials and soon-to-be officials don't have a moment of leisure. It's even more boring than practicing martial arts. The old man and the young man looked at each other and laughed. If talking about military and politics with the old man wasn't like playing the lute to a cow, what was? While drinking, Su Fengyan was silently calculating in his heart, as if he was playing a chess game. The princess's tomb was divided into 2 parts. The greater part was in Luoyang. It seemed that other than the foreign official Helian Wuwei, there were no other forces that could be mobilized. The fatal thing was that this commandant of discipline did not want to get too involved. He wanted to watch the fire burning on the other side of the river. Even if he had substantial support, it was impossible for him to brazenly mobilize the powerful and well-trained Jade Army. Fortunately, there was the white-haired old man Chu Kuangnu. If there were no accidents, he would personally get involved. On the other side, Little Idea had colluded with Zhong Liang. He should at least turn a blind eye to the opening of the emperor's tomb. It was even very likely that he wanted to get rid of the shackles of his identity as the 800-year-old guardian of the tomb. There was no need to talk about the Zhong and Lu families. Even the powerful minister Zhong Shentong, who was on the same level as Helian Wuwei, had personally come to Shihe province. The power of the aristocratic families was bound to be shocking. Apart from this, it was not clear whether there would be some disorderly mountain heads that would come for profit. However, there would definitely be some, and they couldn't be underestimated. Chapter 579. Su Fengyan, on the other hand, had been forcefully tied to the same line by Luo Yang. How much effort he put in depended on how dangerous the situation was. According to Su Fengyan's original intention, this kind of thankless task was to stay out of trouble. For someone like him, who had climbed up and down the tide listening pavilion since he was young, He really had no interest in secret manuals and treasures. To fish in troubled waters, one would only put in effort if the person who was fishing liked to eat fish. It was a chaotic situation. Su Fengyin frowned as he slowly drank his wine. Helian Wuwei glanced at him, his smile shrewd and playful. The two Zen temples were the most respected temples in the world, and the abbot, monk Long Shu, was revered as the head of Buddhism. However, when one actually went there, one would realize that it was far inferior to the temples on some famous mountains in the provinces and counties. It was not at all a big mountain, a big temple, or a big hall. The old abbot, monk Long Shu's residence, was especially simple and crude, no different from that of a villager at the foot of the mountain. It was a somewhat sturdy thatched hut, but it was cramped and the courtyard could not be considered wide. One could only hear the gurgling of a stream in the distance, but there was no stream. The corners were old and the fences were new. If one walked a few more steps, one might even step on some chicken dung. There was an ancient cypress behind the hut, and there was nothing mysterious about it. Under the shade of the tree there was a large water tank. Under the lead of the abbot, the monks of the two Zen temples were pragmatic and practical. They could not see farming as a disgrace. Every time monk Long Shu returned from his work at dusk, he would go to the water tank to wash away the mud, and a lot of silt would settle at the bottom of the tank. It was said that a famous Jiangnan scholar used this mud to make a famous pot, which was widely spread. At this moment, a man and a woman were standing in front of the water tank, whispering to each other. The old abbot had left the temple and descended the mountain. He was going to Beimang, which was thousands of miles away, to quarrel with someone. Someone had to take care of these chickens and ducks, so he handed them over to these two children who had grown up on the mountain. In any case, they often played here and were most familiar with the place, so the old monk was very relieved. The little monk was draped in a brand new and clean green jade kasaya. The two Zen temples were different from the Taoist master mansion on Longhu Mountain. Even if they were rewarded by the imperial court, they did not like to drape themselves in purple. The little monk's kasaya was of a standard that very few monks of high virtue in the temple could wear. However, at this moment, the delicate and pretty little monk had a melancholy expression on his face. His words were full of hesitation. "Lizzie, someone came to the temple to ask for the mud in this large tank. Do you think we should give it to them?" The girl reached out and stirred the clear water in the tank. While doing so, she rolled her eyes and said, "No. In this world, how can a guest come to the temple and take something for free? That's too shameless." The little monk's brows were almost knitted together. "But as long as there's mud, the old abbot will agree every time." The girl glared at him and said, "Now that the old abbot isn't here, I'm in charge. I have the final say. If master and mistress knew about this, they would complain that I don't know how to treat guests." The girl's bright eyes lit up. She was immensely proud of herself, thinking that she had found a perfect compromise. "Why don't we sell it to that person for 1 tael of mud or 1 tael of silver?" The little monk was a simple-minded person. Obviously he wasn't that smart. He had a troubled expression on his face, but he didn't dare to refute the girl. He could only remain silent. The girl thought about it and said in a serious tone, "Selling 1 tael of mud for 1 tael of silver seems like a bit of a bully. Forget it, no matter how much he takes, we only want 1 tael of silver. When we go out we have to be a bit more astute. Since we're in our own home we have to be honest. You see, last time when we went to Bailiang Palace, Su Fengyin was very generous with us. That's called being generous. I can't be stingy." The little monk Nanbei grinned brightly. The girl withdrew her hand from the water jar and whispered, "When we go back to my mother, father, and the old abbot, you can't say that I earned 1 tael of silver. Do you remember?" The little monk smiled foolishly and thought of a stupid idea that didn't need to lie. "Later when we sell mud, I'll go to the mountain to drive the chickens and ducks back into the cages. I won't see anything." The girl rolled her eyes. "When you get older you'll definitely die of stupidity. How can you become a Buddha and burn the Saraira?" The little monk touched his bald head, feeling a bit embarrassed. Just as the girl was about to go find the thick-skinned Jiangnan celebrity who refused to leave the temple to do business, she saw a tall monk in white robes leisurely stroll over. Her eyes smiled into crescent moons as she jogged over and called out, "Father." The little monk who was imitating the crow of a chicken to lure the old chickens back into the cages also smiled. The white-robed monk rubbed his daughter's head and let her do her own thing. The little girl was innocent and carefree. She gave the stupid Nanbei a look that said, "Don't let it slip." Only then did she skip away. The stupid Nanbei was actually not stupid. He only took one look at his master's expression and knew that something had happened. He stopped his comical action of driving the chickens back into the cages. The white-robed monk Li Dongxin hesitated and said, "Your master's master can't quarrel and can't fight. I'm going out for a while. When I'm not here, take care of the plums." The stupid Nanbei nodded vigorously and then asked, "Master's wife knows?" Li Dongxin smiled and said, "Listen to her for small things and follow me for big things. It's been like this all these years." The stupid Nanbei turned his head and thought that since he could remember, he had never heard of a big matter where he listened to his master. Didn't he listen to his master's wife? The white-robed monk touched his big bald head and knew what his stupid disciple was thinking. He laughed and said, "Isn't this a big matter?" The stupid Nanbei carefully asked, "Master, can you go back to the temple with the old abbot?" The white-robed monk sighed, "I don't know." The little monk Nanbei did not say anything else and went to chase after the plums. After a while he came back with the angry girl. The white-robed monk smiled helplessly. There were 4 people in the house. The daughter-in-law's words were not as effective as his daughter's. He could only nag this disciple. It was a pity that this stupid disciple was always on their side. The little girl put her hands on her hips and said, "Father, why didn't you tell me you were going down the mountain?" The white-robed monk smiled embarrassedly and said, "I was afraid you wouldn't allow it." The girl's expression quickly changed from gloomy to affectionate. She was about to speak but her father knew her best. Li Dongxin shook his head and said, "Li Zi, you can't go." The little girl's expression dimmed. She lowered her head and looked at her feet. She seemed to be hiding her red eyes and asked, "Mother agreed?" The white-robed monk nodded. The girl walked closer to him and lightly tugged at his sleeves. "Do you want me to ask for some money from mother?" "No need. Keep it to buy rouge and face powder. Dress up beautifully. Father will only think about the plums at home. The more he thinks about it, the less he feels cold and hungry." Boasting again. "Right, Father, there are many big baldies in the temple. Old baldies all know how to fight. Do you want to call them to go with Father?" "No need. Father walks quickly. They can't keep up." "Oh. Father is not home. If you are bored, go down the mountain with Nanbei and Nanbei to play. You haven't been to Great Peace City. The rouge there is good. Father doesn't have money, but your father's master's abbot's room has many good things. If you sell them, it will be worth a lot. Compared to selling the stinky mud in the water tanks, you can earn much more. Just like the old abbot's meditation mat. That's not good, right?" "What's not good about it? When we go back, I'll have Nanbei weave a new one." "Ah, let's go, let's go. Also, don't hook up with those girls that throw themselves at you. You will make mother angry." "How can that be?" "In Father's eyes, other than Li Zi and your mother, there are no other women." On the mountain path, many pilgrims saw a monk with white robes fluttering in the wind. Some young women and matrons instinctively looked a few more times. In the 100 years of Jianghu, the young sword god Li Chungang with the wooden horse and bull was truly outstanding. The white horse and white robes were still in great peace. The emperor personally led the horse into the palace. Li Dongxin at that time was also truly outstanding. When they were far away from the 2 Zen temples and there was no one around, a white rainbow flashed through the sky. Chapter 580. Jianghu began to spread rumors of a reckless young man. He was dressed in black, barefoot, and had messy hair. He rose like a comet. He led a giant black tiger that was twice the size of a normal tiger. First, he rushed south to Xianxia Academy, and then he charged straight for Beiyang. He didn't take the initiative to hurt anyone along the way. The young man didn't smile or speak. He didn't do good deeds to help the weak, nor did he act like a villain. However, if someone tried to provoke him and blocked his path, no one left a whole corpse. The black-clothed young man was like the white-clothed Luo Yang of the Beimang dynasty. He was unstoppable. Many hotheads in Jianghu who didn't know the severity of the situation bullied him because he was alone. They weighed his weight and felt that he could be used as a stepping stone to build up their reputation. Most of them tore off his limbs or were eaten by the black tiger. When one person in one household crossed the border, the local sects that were slightly more well-informed all held back their troops and warned the younger generation not to join in the fun. During this time, 6 or 7 groups of unknown assassins came one after the other. Their fates were particularly miserable. The young man was practically invulnerable. His brute strength was so great that he could overturn a ship and destroy a city. 300 cavalrymen galloped out of Liangzhou to welcome the black-clothed young man, Su Longxiang. Huang Manor returned to the empty Beiyang palace expressionlessly. In the Wutangin, he saw the fake heir who only had the appearance but no charm. If it weren't for the servant girls he still recognized who risked their lives to stop him, he would have been smashed into meat paste on the spot. The young man didn't see his older brother, nor did he see Su Xiao who was still patrolling the border. Huang Manor didn't seem to know what to do. He stared blankly at Tidehark Lake for a while, then went to the Wutangan. No one could persuade him and very few people dared to. Moreover, the young prince had a terrifying black tiger by his side. Afterwards, Huang Manor became agitated and uneasy. He seemed to have discovered that he was lost. Then he began to rampage through Bailiang Palace. The layers of courtyard walls were all smashed through. No one dared to stand in front of the young prince. Everyone in the northern Liang prince's mansion knew that His Highness the Crown Prince had brought back 2 beautiful foreign women. The younger one lived in the Wutong courtyard and rarely went out. The younger woman was so beautiful that she made people want to have an extra pair of eyes. Unfortunately, compared to the woman who would occasionally go to the lakeside for a walk, she only lived in her small plot of land filled with reeds and never stepped out. She left a graceful figure for everyone to catch a glimpse of, and it was difficult for them to let go of her. After her younger brother mysteriously disappeared, Murong Wuzhu lived a lonely life, but she wasn't sad. She lived under someone else's roof in the Wutangan. Fortunately, she had a gentle temperament that she was born with. Compared to Pei Nanwei who lived in the reeds, it was easier for her to be accepted by the second-class maids. They were all outsiders who had left their hometown. Murong Wuzhu would occasionally visit Pei Nanwei in the reeds near the water. Today, when the two heard the movements in the prince's residence, Murong Wuzhu hurriedly ran out of the room. She stood on the high platform and looked around. She didn't see the familiar slender man, only a crazy barefooted young man. Other than fear, she also couldn't hide her disappointment. Pei Nanwei didn't leave the room. When she saw the dazed young woman return and sit down, she secretly sighed in her heart. Is that prodigal surnamed Su worthy of your concern? Murong Wuzhu calmed herself down and said softly, Sister Pei, I saw the young prince who came back from Mount Longhu. He doesn't look like him. Pei Nanwei mischievously asked. Him? Who is he? Your younger brother or the king of Bailiang? Murong Wuzhu's face turned red. She lowered her head and kneaded the corner of her clothes. Pei Nanwei looked at her and felt a little envious. When a woman was young she would be shy if she could. When she got older she would become disgusting. Murong Wuzhu was afraid that she would be teased again, so she found an excuse to leave. Pei Nanwei didn't get up to see her off. Her small house was built by the lake so it could be surrounded by reeds. In the middle of summer, the reeds were green and several pairs of wild mandarin ducks were floating. She walked out of the house. There were no stone slabs outside the house. It was full of mud. She took off her shoes and socks and walked in the reeds that seemed to be isolated from the world. She gently raised her head and looked to the north. It was Yuan Zuozong who came back with dozens of cavalrymen. For this adopted son of the king of Bailiang, Huang Man, recognized him. Outsiders didn't know what Yuan Zuozong said, but the young prince immediately calmed down. The cavalrymen didn't have time to eat and left the house. They didn't stop and came to the foot of Mount Wudong. Su Longxiang ran barefoot all the way. His speed was faster than a horse. Last time His Royal Highness came to Wudong, only the hierarch Wang Zhonglo came down the mountain to welcome the guest. Today there was only a young man in a simple robe standing under the 4 words, Black Tortoise Dang Xing. Yuan Zuozong nodded to the Taoist priest surnamed Li and stood still. Perhaps Huang Man, had stayed in the small Taoist temple on Mount Longhu for a long time and spent time with the old Taoist master, so she didn't dislike Taoists. Instead she felt close to them. They climbed the mountain quietly. When they reached the top of Little Lotus Peak, Taoist Li Yufu no longer approached the tortoise camel tablet. The young man in black and the giant black tiger came to the cliff together. Here a red robe flew up. Chapter 581. Here Hong Shixiang disintegrated himself and declared to heaven and earth that he would attain Tao for another 300 years. Since this Taoist who became an earth immortal before the age of 30 was the reincarnation of ancestor Lu and Qi Xuanzhen, then the Jianghu great emperor in the prophecy was obviously someone else. Immortal Qi's black tiger, who had been immersed in Taoism on the demon-slaying platform for a long time, had a violent temper. It was unusually docile here lying on the ground. Don't forget that Hong Shixiang was the reincarnation of ancestor Lu and also the reincarnation of Qi Xuanzhen. Hong Shixiang was the former master of the black tiger. The black tiger was psychic and possessed supernatural powers. It shook its head and whimpered. Li Yufu stood in the distance and saw this scene. He was also sad. To him, youngest Uncle Master was a well-deserved celestial figure. Li Yufu respected his master but worshipped youngest Uncle Master. If only Sect Master Hong did not ascend and became a celestial couple with the woman in red and cultivated in the world. Suddenly, Su Longxiang clenched his fists and howled to the sky. The black tiger also roared. The earth shook and the mountains shook. With Su Longxiang's outburst, the qi dynamic was like a flying stone that hit the center of the lake. The new youngest uncle master Li Yufu, who had only been on the mountain for a few years, was like a small boat floating in the sea. He swayed but did not fall over. Li Yufu went up the mountain to welcome and send him off. Li Yufu looked at the man and the tiger following the cavalry inside. His brother was already so domineering. Presumably, His Royal Highness, who even Uncle Master could not subdue, was really as lawless as the rumors said. If he knew that he was going up the mountain in the future, it seemed that he had to find an excuse to not meet him. Li Yufu himself did not know that before Hong Xixiang disintegrated, he left behind 9 words: Wudong will prosper, Yufu will prosper. His master, Yu Xingrui, picked him as an orphan fisherman in Donghai. Although he entrusted him with a lot of things, he did not do anything stupid. Moreover, Wudong Mountain had been in the same vein for hundreds of years and liked nature the most. In recent years, Li Yufu had not only followed the uncle masters to practice Taoism, but also to lead the boxing in front of the main peak palace in the morning and evening. He was also responsible for feeding the green cattle and taking care of the vegetable garden near the waterfall. Uncle Master's best friend Xianxia's secluded bamboo hut was also given to him to clean. Every day he went to a few mountains and mountains. The journey alone was 50 to 60 miles and miles. There were 6 Taoist temples along the way. Many children who finished their homework liked to wait for rabbits to help Uncle Master and Uncle Master help. Buddhism does not depend on people while Taoism cultivates nature. Li Yufu has never been to the ancestral court of Taoism, Mount Longhu, which has suppressed Mount Wudong for hundreds of years. He also felt that it was reasonable for the youngest uncle to be reluctant to leave the mountain. Everyone here has blind dates and the scenery is good. He could still clearly remember the first and last time he chatted with little martial uncle. At that time, little martial uncle was at the peak of his power. He rode a crane down the mountains and flew a sword thousands of miles to subdue dragons and tigers. He had cut off the providence of several countries. He could enter and leave Great Peace City as if there was no one there. No one in the world dared to look down on Wudong Mountain. Li Yufu was brought to the small lotus peak by his master. His palms were sweaty. His master didn't say anything to comfort him. He just smiled all the way. When he reached the waist of the mountain, he bumped into the sect leader, who was herding cows and basking in the sun. After his master left, little martial Uncle Hong waved at him. The two of them sat on a big rock under the shade of a tree. Seeing that he was uneasy, little martial uncle smiled and said, "When you first came up the mountain, I should have gone to fetch you. Unfortunately, I wasn't on the mountain at that time." Li Yufu was very nervous. He sat upright and still. He shook his head and said, "I don't dare." The young sect leader, who was not even 30 years old, said in a warm voice, "I remember when I went up the mountain as a child. It was snowing heavily. No matter how hard I tried, it couldn't be swept clean. Big martial brother stood under the archway waiting for us. At that time, I thought that the Wudong Taoist had made a big snowman over there." Martial brother smiled and shook off the snowflakes. "Only then did I know that it was a living person. I was shocked and almost cried. At that time, I scolded martial brother behind my master's back for a long time. Martial brother didn't get angry. When we went up the mountain, I turned my head and secretly looked at him. He smiled. Your eldest martial uncle is well versed in the subject and understands everything. Meng Shi's divinatory qi, Jing Fang's adaptability, Sun Shuang's promotion and promotion, Deng Xianxiao Chen Yufan's najia. He studied deeply and finally cultivated the De Huang Ting. He told me that the ancient alchemists cultivated their spirits, which was full of wonders. After that, they cultivated their qi and then their essence. The more they wrote, the farther they were from the Tao. Cultivating one's life but not one's nature is the first disease of cultivation. He also said that the cultivation of Taoists was no different from that of martial artists. However, Big Martial Brother said a lot. I didn't really understand at that time. Fortunately, he didn't blame me. There are things that the sect leader doesn't understand? When you say that, haha, it sounds like me. In the future, when you see His Royal Highness, remember to say the same thing. That guy is easily swayed. Alright, Jadeax, your name is not bad. Reporting to the sect leader, my master helped me to name it. Your master is knowledgeable and has a deep cultivation. He doesn't show off, you have to cherish him. Jadeax, do you want to cultivate immortality? Sect leader, this? I haven't thought about it. Don't rush to answer. I'm just asking casually. I'll come back and report to you when I figure it out. Just call me young martial uncle. Come, I'll teach you a set of fist and sword techniques. You can go down the mountain after you've mastered them. Young martial uncle, please speak. I'll listen attentively. Recalling the past, Li Yufu had nothing to do and felt a little sad. He walked leisurely and came to the main hall of the main peak. He saw the statue of Jianghu the Great. Li Yufu looked at it many times and became absent-minded every time. This time was no exception. I look at Jianghu and Jianghu looks at me. On the border of Beiliang, 10,000 dragon elephant cavalry were ready to go. Su Xiao, who was wearing an old armor, stood in front of the army. He pointed in the direction of Beimang to the young man in black beside him and said softly, "Go and pick up your brother." Huang Man seemed to smile innocently, but there was a sense of bloody heroism in it. Su Xiao turned around and asked with a smile, "Longxiang army, do you dare to march 1,000 miles straight?" The soldiers were excited. "Fight to the death." The young man rode on the black tiger and took out a ribbon. He raised his hands and twirled it around his hair. His actions were exactly the same as his brother's. Chapter 582. 10,000 Longxiang army hastily broke camp and marched hastily toward Beimang amidst the earth-shaking bugle horn. Let alone the ordinary Beiliang soldiers, even Wei Fuqing and Dian Xiongzhao, these generals with real power in their hands, felt that it was inconceivable. Previously in the battle between Chen Zhibao and Hong Jingyan, the chess and sword music school was holding a plate of bronze figurines and watching the battle from the side. The battle was full of ups and downs. After the battle, Chen Zhibao went to the Green Pure Land mountain to avoid the heat and heal his wounds. Wei Fuqing controlled 1/3 of Beiliang's white crossbow feather forest, while Dian Xiongzhao led 6,000 iron stupa heavy cavalry. All of them could be considered as Chen Zhibao's trusted subordinates and direct subordinates. This time not only these two met, but also several young and strong generals who rose to prominence on the Liangmang border by virtue of their military exploits also happened to meet together. Birds of a feather flocked together. Chen Zhibao's direct subordinates and forces were divided into two distinct groups. They did not merge into one group. The other group was made up of civil officials. All of them were scholars and aides, who emphasized strategy and were light cavalry and archery. Most of them came from superior family background. Both sides minded their own business and did not see eye to eye. The whole world knew that the great general Su Xiao doted on his children. In the Beiliang army, 3 elite brigades with nearly 10,000 men were named after his children. Only the eldest son of the first wife did not have this fortune. The Longxiang army, which had 10,000 men, was especially famous. It was a true cavalry that had been through hundreds of battles. Not to mention the position of the main general, even the position of the deputy general was always empty. In these years, Yuan Zhuozongyao was in charge of the position of the deputy general, but he never interfered in the specific affairs. However, every time there were elite soldiers in the Beiliang army, more than half of them would be sent to the Longxiang army to train. This cavalry army, which was between heavy cavalry and light cavalry, could be said to be the darling of the Beiliang army. In the past 10 years, there had rarely been a battle at the border of Liangmang where more than 50 to 60,000 men were involved. However, as long as there was a battle and there was military merit to be gained, the Dragon Elephant Cavalry would definitely be the first to rush to the battlefield. They fought bloody battles and fought to the death and had never lost a battle. This also gave the Beiliang army an impression that in the future, when the hedonistic eldest son of the first wife became the king of Beiliang, he would definitely have to rely on his naturally strong younger brother to charge and break through the enemy lines in order to sit steadily. Otherwise, the 800 light cavalry of the Phoenix Battalion, no matter how valiant and good they were in battle, they would only have less than 1,000 men. Once the Liangmang army started an all-out war, there would be tens of thousands of troops on all fronts. It was Chen Zhibao who made the entire spring and autumn period understand the horror of multiple types of soldiers working together in battle. When he was in command, it was said that his military orders could be accurately given to every one of the captains. When the army was in formation, they could advance and retreat freely. He had truly reached the realm where he could command them as he wished. Even though the war Saint Yi Baikue had a blood feud with Chen Zhibao for killing his wife and daughter, he still couldn't help but praise from the bottom of his heart when he faced the enemy. This person's deployment of troops is flawless and superb. Yi Baikue remembered that the current emperor once stayed up late to read military books and forgot to eat and sleep. After the morning court session, he smiled and asked the court full of talented civil and military officials, "Dear officials, who can compare to Chen Zhibao in the art of war?" At that time, the Beiliang army's reputation was at its peak. Naturally, the civil officials kept quiet and looked down. The generals frowned. Some of the generals who would become the backbone of the Gu party looked at each other and then looked at General Gu Jiantang. The latter kept his eyes closed and rested. The Grand Preceptor of West Chu, Sun Shiji, answered expressionlessly, "No one can compare to him." There was a small village on Jianghu Mountain that was planted with green willows. Until now, the village still didn't have a female owner. Over the years, no woman had caught Qin Jibao's eye. The servants in the village were all disabled old soldiers who had retired from the army. Although they were servants in name, they lived a comfortable life. Some of them even got married and had children. These children, like their parents, didn't know that they were inferior. When they saw the general in white who didn't smile often, they weren't afraid at all. The women who slowly grew up in the village even had the mentality that there was no man in the world except for him. Outside, there were rumors that Qin Jibao had fought with Hong Jingyan, the fourth most powerful expert in the world, and had suffered a fatal injury. However, at this time, Qin Jibao was wearing a white robe and his face didn't look withered. He sat on a stone bench under a willow tree. The village didn't have an outer wall. At a glance, one could see thousands of miles of yellow sand. There were young girls carrying plates of cut watermelons or a pot of iced plum soup. Qin Jibao didn't say anything. The young girls were used to it. They stole a few glances and then turned to leave. They didn't want to disturb their master's quiet contemplation. Qin Jibao was known to be familiar with poetry and books. He was full of strategies. His attainments in zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting were not shallow. He was better than the scholars. However, it was rare to hear him speak in a scholarly manner. Even more so, it was rare to see him recite poetry with scholars. Most of the time in Beiliang's army, he had accumulated a lot of prestige. He was second only to one person, so he preferred to be alone. Very few people cared about what this white-clothed war immortal was thinking. Wei Dian and the others were used to following orders, they never doubted him. Perhaps even if Qin Jibao told them that he was tired of being a general and wanted to go to the capital to pull the emperor down from the dragon throne, they would only cheer. Qin Jibao suddenly laughed coldly because he remembered a lot of interesting things. When the smoke of war subsided and the curtain of spring and autumn came to an end, it was a lot of bitterness but also a lot of interesting things. For example, the Empress Dowager of the Southern Tang was fond of theater. She called herself the ancestor of the Pear Garden. She was so obsessed with theater that she couldn't extricate herself. She ignored the state affairs for 10 years, mingled with theater performers and was muddle-headed. When her country was destroyed, she finally said something clear. She wore an unsightly theater costume and sat in the palace hall. Qin Jibao's eyes were cold. He chuckled softly and said, "Theater performers who can't get much money. Theater performers have no loyalty, but those who watch the show have feelings?" The Longxiang army raided Beimang without warning. The second son, Su Longxiang, rode in the front, and Yuan Zuozong brought up the rear. Su Xiao returned to the military camp. An old scholar was concentrating on a game of chess. He was Su Weisheng's teacher, the Shangyin Academy's chancellor Mr. Wang. Back then, Su Fengyin had seen him play a game of chess with the lousy chess player Su Xiao outside the red-crowned crane tower on Mount Qingliang. He had seen the chancellor withdraw his moves more than 10 times. From then on, he had an indelible psychological shadow of the so-called national chess player. Mr. Wang boasted that he had never tasted defeat, but he was too much of a scoundrel in the marketplace. However, since Chancellor Wang could be Su Weisheng's teacher, he definitely wouldn't be careless about the art of war. After Su Xiao sat down, he wasn't in a hurry to urge Mr. Wang to play. He smiled and said, "On behalf of Huang Manor, I thank Mr. Wang for secretly training the Longxiang army all these years." Chapter 583. The Chancellor picked up a white chess piece and placed it down heavily. His face was full of confidence as he stroked his beard and smiled. "The game is set. General, you've lost again." Su Xiao didn't expose this Mister's evil act of secretly changing the position of the black chess pieces. He pretended to admit defeat. "Losing to Mr. Su Xiao is honorable even though I've lost." The old Mister, who had almost no chess ethics, didn't feel guilty at all. He was refreshed and said, "Playing chess with you is indeed a blessing in life." Su Xiao stood up and walked to the map of Beimang. He slowly drew a route for the army with his finger. Mr. Wang stared at the map with narrowed eyes and didn't speak for a long time. Su Xiao also didn't change his expression. It was the Chancellor who couldn't hold it in anymore. He said softly, "Chaotic, very chaotic." Chao Changqing added fuel to the fire in the southern court and they're about to make a big fuss. The Empress of the North has always disliked Buddhism. She wanted to worship Taoism and destroy Buddhism. She wanted to unify the religion for her own use and create a second Jianghu under her skirt. In the end, no one expected the Dragon Tree monk to go to the Tao Te Ching sect alone. He didn't listen to reason and just sat there, enduring the rain of arrows and swords for a whole 10 minutes. "General, you mobilized the Longxiang army at this time. Aren't you afraid that the North Court and the South Court will work together to deal with your Beiliang cavalry? Su Zhao's back was slightly hunched. He looked at the map and said calmly, Beimang is not as rich as the Central Plains. The imperial tent has been short of money for the past few years. Feeding the 12 generals and maintaining a standoff with the Beiliang army and Gu Jiantang on the eastern front is already the limit. There is still a long way to go before that old woman wants to swallow Beiliang in one go. If the army is strong, it needs real money. Where will the money come from? How could she not be envious of such a fat sheep? In the past, she did not dare to slaughter the meat because Bodhisattva Tuoba and the other preceptors did not approve of it. But now, with the Chilan state preceptor who was regarded as a Taoist saint, and with the support of the other generals, Bodhisattva Tuoba could only watch coldly from the sidelines. The annihilation of Buddhism was already set in stone. Whether I send the troops or not, it would not delay the old woman's action. Not to mention the abbot of the 2 Zen temples, only the Buddha himself would be able to do it. She was indeed forced into a corner by our border policy in recent years. Zhang Julu and Gu Jiantang's alliance was very effective. These 2 bastards also forced Beimang to use all its national strength to fight with my Beiliang cavalry. The Beimang Empress wanted to eat up the financial resources of the Buddhism in the country and then swallow Beiliang in one go. Only then would she be able to bypass the eastern front that was getting more and more stable. She would then be able to move south and occupy Shishu and Nanzhao. With food and soldiers, it would be time to fight with the Liang dynasty for the world. Those who were qualified to talk and fart were well aware of this intention. This was Zhang Julu's ability to scheme in the imperial court. Originally, if the eastern front was too weak, Beimang could have directly borrowed several great generals and hundreds of thousands of soldiers from the western front and sent 400,000 cavalry to the eastern front. They would have crushed the eastern front into a sieve. First, they would have taken over Tai and city and become the ruler of the world. Then they would have turned around and targeted Beiliang. This way I would have lived longer than him and Gu Jiantang. I believe that in the whole world only that coquettish woman who flirts with me every now and then would be happy to see me. Other than her there is no one else. Sir Wang nodded in deep agreement. Green Eyes is like me. They both play a good game of chess. Su Xiao smiled. Originally, this was a game of chess that would have lasted for at least 20 or 30 years. However, both sides were impatient. Compared to Beimang, the Empress was even more impatient. This was because Zhang Julu controlled the military and politics of the Northern Front with one hand and digested the power of the old 8 countries of spring and autumn in the south with the other. Most importantly, this Grand Secretary prevented the Emperor from trying to emphasize culture and suppress military force to a considerable extent. This made the tension of our dynasty far greater than that of the resource-poor Beimang. The longer we dragged it out, the greater our advantage. Our Liang, after unifying the spring and autumn, can be considered to have a truly large family and business. It can withstand the torment. In addition, we have a diligent mender like Zhang Julu. If I were the Emperor of Beimang, I would feel uncomfortable all over. Who the hell would want to be neighbors with a well-off and well-educated man? Wouldn't that be like being bullied every day? The Chancellor of the Education Palace laughed. Great generals' words are coarse, but they are reasonable. The old man sighed with emotion. People who live high in the library say it's peaceful, but they always think that as long as they go out, they can manage the world and help the people. They can turn the tide in a desperate situation. They make it so that governing and pacifying the world is as easy as writing a few words at their fingertips. The danger is no less than that of a military town's separatist regime. These words were personally spoken by Green Eyes in front of the Emperor. As a scholar who reached the Zhuangyuan rank to be able to say such a thing, it can be seen that he is very suitable to be the Grand Secretary. No wonder Zhang Julu can be the great general's opponent. Hey great general, we are thousands of li away from the topic. Su Xiao continued to point at the map. He said with a laugh, my thinking is different from teachers. This time the Longxiang army is going to the north. Not only they want to fight a battle, they want to fight a tough battle. Picking up soft persimmons to pinch is not our Beiliang army's temperament. Teacher is worried that if the Longxiang army wins the battle, those scholars of the southern dynasty who have obtained riches and honor, will forget their ancestors and betray their ancestors, will hate the Beiliang even more. Actually, in my opinion, if the Beiliang cavalry does not teach them a lesson, those new nobles of the southern dynasty, who followed their fathers to flee to the north when they were young, will have their tails raised to the sky early on. They will have to be ruthlessly whipped before they know what is called fear. I want them to be afraid to the bone. These bastards are the same as those scholars of the spring and autumn period. They can't remember what's good for them. Therefore this time the Longxiang army is going to fight to the death with the first military town in Longyao province, Tile City, which is ranked first in terms of military strength. The other military towns, Gentleman's Mansion, Ligu and Maolong, are all tough bones. They are not in the same line. The Longxiang army is going to take a detour and attack them one by one. The old teacher sighed with worry, but the Longxiang army only has 10,000. Not counting the troops and horses along the way, just the 5 towns alone have 60,000 elite armored soldiers. They still have to face the 2 Beimang great generals face to face. Is that okay? 10,000 Longxiang army, how many people can they withdraw and come back? Su Xiao chuckled, I forgot to tell teacher, our Beiliang's great snow dragon cavalry is also about to set out. The Beiliang cavalry is the best in the world, the great snow dragon cavalry is the best in Beiliang. In this hot summer the old teacher seemed to feel the chill. He pulled up his sleeve. He muttered to himself, but doesn't this mean that we are going to fight for real? It's not appropriate, it's really not appropriate. Su Xiao pressed his palm on the map and said, my son is there. Is this reason enough? Chapter 584. It was becoming harder and harder to live in Jing. Not only were the foreign businessmen sighing, even the officials were so worried they were pulling at their beards. In the first 20 years of Great Peace City of the current dynasty, every mu of land only cost 600 taels of silver. Now it was still expensive and cheap, but it had risen to an eye-popping 2,500 taels of silver per mu. No wonder the left servant of Minxia province, Sun Shiji, had the saying that every mu of land had the same value as gold. A small courtyard even at the very edge of Jing, cost close to 1,000 taels of silver. The scholars who came to Jing for the imperial examination all complained incessantly. Fortunately, there were the local guilds that flourished because of the times, so most of the scholars who did not have enough money did not have nowhere to go. Also, there were monasteries to rent. Normal scholars could afford the rent, so there were no complaints. Only those literary magnates who only had a good reputation but no gold and silver could not afford to buy a place in Jing in their entire lives. They would often write a few self-deprecating poems. They could express their feelings and also gain the sympathy of the poor scholars, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Some guilds that had produced large and small yellow doors or handling guilds would often hang up signs that would allow them to rent 1,000 taels of silver a day. These places with good feng shui were in short supply. There were a total of 600 guilds in Jing. Most of them were located next to each other in the southeast of Great Peace City. Every time the imperial examination was held, it would be bustling. If one was not amorous, it would be a waste of youth. This large area of guilds had all kinds of food and drink, restaurants and brothels as numerous as the hairs on a cow. Originally, the scholars going to the imperial examination were worried that they would be unfamiliar with the place. Their local accent was scorned by the locals of Jing. When they entered Great Peace City and lived in the guilds, they found that they were surrounded by people from their hometown. Those who did not have money were happy. Those who had money in their pockets wanted to spend it all to enjoy themselves. Did they really think that these people were stupid with too much money? Of course not. Most of the scholars from the same hometown who were qualified to enter the capital to take the imperial examinations had studied hard. They were just short of breaking through the last layer of window paper. Once they had jumped through the Dragon Gate, they would always remember the days when they were poor, when other people only had a few copper coins for a piece of flatbread or a few taels of silver for a full meal. When they soared in the future, as long as it was within their ability, how could they not be happy to help a fellow villager who had helped them in the past? As a result, the business of almost all the shops in this area, which was known as the Dragonfish Restaurant, was exceptionally good compared to the other markets. Moreover, many foreigners who were already officials in power in the capital liked to come here every now and then to gather with their friends. They would cheer their fellow countrymen on or give them advice in person. This scene was just a small microcosm of the competition between the 4 parties in the Liang dynasty. Unfortunately, as the Green Party, one of their best friends, gradually withered away, the rich scholars of Qingzhou became homeless ghosts. Their voices in the Fish Dragon Strip area became quieter and quieter. The White Lion Building was not originally called this name. It was called the Heavenly Fragrance Building. At that time business was average. This year it had made a lot of money. It could be said that last year the head of the brothel, Li Baisher, had stayed in a big brothel nearby. This beauty did not need to be said. She was the only prostitute on the rouge list. For the men of Jing, just this point alone was enough. Li Baisher was known as the Queen of Beauty and Beauty, and she had a good reputation. Several famous and upright officials in the imperial court had been sponsored by her. She was also an official from Dongyue, and her family background was very powerful. Not only the Baisher restaurant, but many nearby restaurants also benefited from her fame and were overcrowded. They were all rich young masters who came because of her reputation. The White Lion restaurant also had a few specialty dishes that were incomparably spicy. To diners who leaned towards the strong palate, it was undoubtedly a good place to eat without spending much money. Today a group of customers had arrived. There were only 3 of them, but their wealth was different from before. The restaurant owner still gave them enough face and personally served them. There was no other reason. The young master Zhao who led the way knew how to conduct himself. He had known the manager for many years and often chatted with him, so it was to his liking. The shopkeeper surnamed Lu was not stupid at all. Not only did he cook, but he also served the dishes himself. In addition to the many years of friendship with Prince Zhao, the 2 friends of Prince Zhao did not look like common people. One of them was a woman disguised as a man. How could she escape the sharp eyes of the shopkeeper Lu? He knew at first glance that she was an extraordinary lady. Could it be that brother Prince Zhao had taken a fancy to the daughter of a high official? This was a good thing. It would be even better if he could attend a few cups of wedding wine in the future and meet the big shots in the capital. As for the other man with a white face and no beard, shopkeeper Lu did not dare to look at him. He was wearing an unfamiliar satin that could not be said to be exquisite. Compared to the clothes of the rich people he had seen in the past, it seemed to be a small style of a local rich man. After Prince Zhao took a seat in the private room, he smiled at the woman who covered up her appearance clumsily and asked, "My the great Prince of Sui, how is this place?" She snorted coldly and said, "It's extremely shabby." Prince Zhao was not surprised by this answer. He said with a smile, "The dishes are not good to look at either. They only have one characteristic, which is spicy. But don't you always say that you can eat spicy food? When the time comes, if you have the ability, don't drink a mouthful of water." She rolled her eyes and said, "Can't I drink water when I'm thirsty? Zhao Kai, what can you do to me?" The young man who was called Zhao Kai leaned against the back of the chair and gave a thumbs up. Princess Sui Zhu's true temperament is admirable. The woman raised her eyebrows and slammed the table. She said angrily, "Surname Zhao, call me young master Sui." Zhao Kai said helplessly, "Fine, fine. Who asked you to be my sister? The great prince of Sui is the great prince of Sui." The woman did not know if she was angry or sincere. She said very hurtfully, "Anyway, I don't treat you as my brother. What you think is your business." Zhao Kai's face was sad. The woman added frost to the snow and said with a sneer, "Still pretending." Zhao Kai did not care. He laughed and was very happy. The man who looked the most like an official among the 3 stood with his hands clasped behind his back and was very respectful. He looked at the 2 young men and women bickering with an expressionless face. Zhao Kai turned his head and said with a smile, "Great master, come and sit. This is not the palace with strict rules. Let's do whatever is comfortable." 2 strands of white hair hung down. The man near his chest shook his head and said, "I don't need to kneel to be comfortable." It had always been the eunuchs of the dynasty who called themselves that. Only those eunuchs with some status and power had the qualifications and courage to do so. However, since the young man was Zhao Kai, the illegitimate son of the current emperor, and the woman was Princess Sui Zhu, the identity of the eunuch who Zhao Kai called Great Master was revealed. The number 1 eunuch in the dynasty, Han Diaoxi. This old eunuch who could not be considered a man was nicknamed Human Cat. If he was not the stabilizing force of the palace and obstructing time after time, West Chu's Chao Changqing would have already taken the emperor's head. The finger-profound realm of the Handiao Temple was too incredible to be able to skin the talisman General Hongjia, one of the 4 outstanding grandmasters of the pugilistic world. This damned eunuch was feared by all the court officials. Every time shopkeeper Lu knocked on the door and served the dishes, he had to apologize and take a bite before letting the 2 young masters eat. After eating 2 dishes, Princess Sui Zhu suddenly put down her chopsticks and said sullenly, "Eating like this is no different from eating in the palace. Zhao Kai, let's go downstairs and pick a lively table." Zhao Kai smiled and said, "We'll listen to you. Great master, the great prince of Sui's words are the most important today. We'll all listen to him, okay?" Han Diaoxi's mouth twitched for the first time and nodded slightly. Human Cat was not making fun of Princess Sui Zhu's childish nature. He was just grateful that the young master deliberately arranged for him to sit at the same table. In this world, Han Diaoxi had seen too many people who treated him well but did not remember him well. When he was still an ordinary eunuch in Handiao Temple, he had followed his master out in plain clothes and met that lowly woman. She had also sincerely invited him to have a meal with her. Even though she knew that he was a eunuch, it was the same. Handiao Temple would remember that simple meal for the rest of their lives. If someone respects me, Han Xingxian, an inch, I'll respect them 1,000 feet. If someone bullies me, I'll bully them for the rest of their life. Countless civil officials and generals who were tortured and killed by human cat were glad that they did not have an afterlife to suffer again. Since it was fish dragon slices, Baisha restaurant was of course full of good and bad people. There were scholars, rich gentlemen, and even some scoundrels who lived in brothels as thugs. Shopkeeper Lu had no objection to changing tables. Rich people were always happy to do things. The restaurant's business was good and it was meal time. The shopkeeper finally cleared an empty table and had the waiters quickly clean it up. Zhao Kai and the other two sat down and heard a bare-chested man at the next table step on the bench. He clenched his teeth and scolded, "Damn it, a few days ago a pretty boy came to our dingfeng to visit women. He didn't have money in his pocket to pretend to be a master, and he used a few nonsensical essays to fool us. The poems were not poems, the words were not poems, and they were noisy. I'm going to beat this little bastard up with a stick on the spot." Sitting at the same table were a few scholars who did not have much money. They had been in the brothel for a long time. The scholar who was in charge of paying for the prostitutes was suffering from a lack of money, and the price of his sisters was too high. He thought that it was not a good idea to stay in the brothel for a long time, so he wondered if he could build a good relationship with the head guard in front of him. He did not expect to lower the price, but before he went to bed he could at least get rid of some unnecessary tips. In brothels there were many ways to do things. To maintain one's reputation it was very expensive. The extra expenses on maids and servants were accumulated bit by bit, and the amount of broken silver was also very frightening. An old-fashioned scholar who did not look like a clever person hesitated for a moment and said, "I've heard of this person." He recited 3 poems and now everyone knows about fish dragon slices. They're all not bad. Among them, "The lonely light shines on me, my liver and gallbladder are all ice and snow, and the east wind of spring brings the spring," are all good poems. Chapter 585. The burly guard's expression changed greatly. He spat mercilessly and got up to leave. The leading scholar was experienced in the ways of the world. It took him a lot of persuasion to get him back to his seat. He said, "No matter how good the poem is, it's just a small path." Su Weisheng, the great poet of Shangyin Academy, also said that the poem is just a poetic remnant. Most of the contemporary poets in the literary world are just picking up scraps from the pile of old papers of their predecessors. They can't be considered as real talent, let alone establishing their own school. In my opinion, what's the point of being cold? If it's really cold, why would they go to the brothel to make a fuss? Isn't this just a cheap gimmick? In terms of character, it's far from being as straightforward and forthright as Instructor Hong. The burly guard liked what he heard. He took a bite of the fatty and spicy drumstick. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a young man who looked like a rich man laughing at a nearby table. He glared at him and said, "What are you laughing about?" Zhao Kai said with an honest face, "You're right. Those scholars who fish for fame should be beaten up." When the man saw that his expression did not seem to be fake or sarcastic, he laughed and said, "You're quite smart. When you go to Dingfeng someday, tell them my name Hong Sanlong and the price of the girls will be fair." Zhao Kai gave a fist salute and thanked him. Princess Sui Zhu lowered her head and rolled her eyes. That man should have some influence in this area. After talking about a lot of things, he became more and more unscrupulous with his words, which were very boorish and grating to the ear. "Since I came out of my mother's womb, I've been living a hard life. You want me to put in a good word for those rich kids? I don't care if they're good or bad. As long as they're better than my reincarnation, I can't wait to chop them to death. I can't bear to see them live a good life. If those rich kids are diligent in their studies and treat people well, they deserve to die even more. Won't they give us a way out?" "Haha, Mr. Liu, don't worry. I'm not criticizing you. You're kind and honest. You're good. Since there's fly droppings in a pot of porridge, there might be a few grains of rice in a pile of droppings." The scholar with the surname Liu, who was patted on the shoulder, smiled awkwardly. Being praised was worse than being scolded. Han Diaosi narrowed his eyes and said softly, "How dare you use the word dragon in your name?" Zhao Kai, who was very familiar with his great master, hurriedly said with a smile, "Let's not bother about these trivial matters. Let's go. When the great prince of Sui has had his fill of tea and is no longer thirsty, we'll go and meet Li Baisher." Under the table, Princess Sui Zhu stepped on the back of Zhao Kai's shoe, not forgetting to give it a hard twist. Zhao Kai put on a bitter face. After paying the bill and leaving the White Lion restaurant, Zhao Kai cautiously reminded her, "You'll definitely have to wait when you get there. Don't be angry. Since you're sneaking out of the palace, you can't just do whatever you want. Otherwise, you can hang a plaque on your body saying that you're the princess. Princess Suizhu said angrily, "Why aren't you the one with the title of prince? Wouldn't that be more useful?" Zhao Kai smiled mischievously and said, "How many people outside the palace know that I'm a prince? It's useless even if I talk until my mouth breaks." She was stunned for a moment, then turned her head and said, "I can't believe you can still laugh." Zhao Kai walked on the street with his hands behind his head. Great Master said that standing is better than kneeling. You won't think about sitting. That's contentment. In that case, I feel that smiling is much more joyous than crying, and it's also less annoying, isn't it? She hesitated for a moment. Then when Su Fengyin took away a few red talisman armors, did you laugh or cry? Zhao Kai smiled and said, "He's my brother-in-law anyway. We're family. It doesn't matter who has the things." She sneered, "Your brother-in-law and brother-in-law, but in the end, you still have to kill each other. So fun. I can't even cry if I want to." Zhao Kai suddenly said, "Beiliang is going to be in chaos." Princess Suizhu's tone was even more sarcastic. "In any case, that guy thinks His Royal Highness is useless. Later on, he's also very embarrassing when he practices the knife. If Beiliang is really in chaos, he'll just hide. He's even worse than you." Zhao Kai sighed and said, "It would be better if you didn't say that last sentence." She said casually, "Father is quite satisfied with the red sect female bodhisattva that you recommended to the palace. He's very interested in the struggle between the red sect and the yellow sect, as well as your suggestion of signing the living Buddha with the silver vase. In the future he might let you go to the western regions with her." Zhao Kai also casually said, "Oh." Su Fengyin and Helian Wuwei went to many places. Other than the important military matters, they did not participate in other matters, whether it was important or trivial. They even did not mind Su Fengyin reading some of the military and political documents. After 5 days of running around, Su Fengyin had a rough understanding of the outline of Shihe province. Today the two of them finally had some free time from their busy schedule and went to the place where they first met to sell watermelons near the courier route. Su Fengyin did not hide anything. While sitting on a small stool and waiting for customers, he said directly, "From the speed at which Uncle received information about the Dragon Tree Monk in the Tao Te sect, it can be seen that Beimeng places great importance on the courier route. They don't lose out to Su Xiao, who single-handedly built the courier route system during the spring and autumn period. Especially the eastern line where Shihe province is located, it can be compared to the western line where Liang Mang confronted each other. Along the way I've seen many inconspicuous things, but they're all Beimeng slowly accumulating military power." Helian Wuwei smiled in relief and said, "You can see the whole picture from a small clue. Not bad, not bad." Chapter 586. He turned around and saw Su Fengyin's serious face. Holding the order, he handed over half a watermelon and smiled faintly. In fact, in an imperial court, even if it's the few that have fallen in the spring and autumn period, there are definitely many smart people who have great foresight. However, whether or not they can inform the heavens and make the emperor happy, allowing the laws and regulations that contain ambition or ambition to be smoothly implemented is the crux of the problem. Your Liang dynasty has many pillars, especially with Jianghu in the middle. You are naturally better than others. To tell you the truth, as the county magistrate of Shihe province who was born in the army, every time I think about it I feel worried just like you do now. In terms of military strength and armaments, the soldiers of the 12 generals are not weak. But compared to the Beiliang army, even Tuoba is not shameless enough to say that he is invincible. Fortunately, Beimeng learned from the shame and became brave. After suffering a lot, they know that the men in the south are not all weak scholars. There are also butchers like Su Xiao and Gu Jiantang who kill without blinking. Over the years, Beimeng has been gradually getting stronger. As for our side, I think it's a pity. Fengyin, can you guess? Su Fengyin said with a smile, "There are many scholars who fled northern Mang during the spring and autumn period who have the qualifications to give advice and suggestions to the imperial preceptor or the great general. However, we are still lacking a first-rate strategist who can become the imperial preceptor." Helian Wuwei took a bite of the watermelon, looked up and said, "Don't laugh. Beimeng doesn't have none. It's just that he hasn't stepped into the stage yet." Su Fengyin lowered his voice and asked, "Li Mibi who weaves spider webs?" Helian Wuwei turned his head and spat on the ground. He sneered, "This old dog is the best in the world at harming people. Ruling a country? He is thousands of miles away from ruling a country. But he knows his place and doesn't mess with the court. Otherwise I would fight him to the death." Su Fengyin asked curiously, "If it's not him, who else could it be?" Helian Wuwei said vaguely, It's the headmaster of the chess and sword music school. He's been missing for almost 20 years. When he was in his middle age he was looked down upon by the empress and disappeared completely in a fit of anger. I'm guessing that he went to Liang. As for what he did, I have no way of knowing. Perhaps even our emperor doesn't know. I don't believe that such a person would die quietly in the south. Su Fengyan said, I heard from my master Li Yishan that this guy is very good at chess. He is almost on par with Huang Longshi. The old man sighed, I have seen many people with great ambition but little talent in my life. Only the head of the chess and sword music school has great ambition and talent. The chess manor has a cultivation method that allows one to place 1,000,000 pieces in a lifetime. Do you know how many pieces that guy placed? Su Fengyan said in astonishment, it can't possibly be 10 million, right? Wouldn't that mean that he was born to stay in front of the chessboard and play chess? A chess addict like him can't possibly have great prospects, right? My master always says that playing chess on the chessboard is just a checkmate. There's nothing special about becoming a first-rate national player. It's different from being a person. The old man laughed heartily. You're too smart for your own good. That guy played very few games. You can count them with your fingers. I estimate that he placed less than 7,000 to 8,000 pieces. Su Fengyan frowned and said, at the very most there are less than 100 games. Why is playing a game of chess with the chess manor's manor head of the chess sword music house as if he's gambling with his life? The old man slowly said, do you know how this guy played his last game? After he lost to Huang Xianxia he went into seclusion to study. When he mastered his chess skills he played against the old headmaster. It was a life and death game. Whoever lost would die. Su Fengyan clicked his tongue. Both headmasters were ruthless people. Helian Wuwei laughed in schadenfreude. You should just pray that this kind of person doesn't make it back to Beimang alive. Otherwise, if you were to succeed him and become the king of Beiliang, you'd be in for a lot of trouble if this guy were to still be alive. Su Fengyan said in all seriousness, I'll go to Thunder Roll Temple tomorrow and curse this old man to death. Helian Wuwei laughed loudly. Then remember to curse me to death as well. With me in Shiha province, even Su Xiao will have to be a little afraid. Su Fengyan didn't need to be polite with this old man. He joked, Uncle Helian, your skin is even thicker than mine. Helian Wuwei nodded. Humans, as long as they get older, they'll be cursing themselves just like how I cursed Li Mibi as a chicken thief. They're all thick-skinned, afraid of death and greedy for life. They're not as open-minded about life and death as they were when they were young and full of vigor. Su Fengyan took a bite of the watermelon. He thought of Su Xiao and his master Li Yishan, who were younger than Helian Wuwei. Helian Wuwei said slowly, now that I've taken you to see the political affairs of our province, I can tell you some things directly. I can't say much about other generals and provincial governors, but as far as I'm concerned, Helian Wuwei, I don't expect all the generals and officials under my command to be saints. It's okay to be greedy for money, but don't be too greedy. In my opinion, pedantic and honest officials who earn their own reputation are not as good as capable officials who can fill their own pockets but can also benefit the people. If you don't cross the line, I think I'm very easy to talk to. If you cross the line, then I'm sorry. I don't care if you're my relative or my trusted aide, I'll kill you if I need to kill you and confiscate your property if I need to confiscate your property. I won't be lenient. This is called nothing can be accomplished without rules and standards. How to recognize people is difficult, how to use people is difficult, and how to make use of people is even more difficult. Even if you go to the university, you won't be able to learn about the sages. Because scholars cherish their reputation, they don't have the guts to write about the shrewdness and black-bellied knowledge. Moreover, most scholars don't have the ability to write about it. Go and count the number of Zhuangyuan in your Liang dynasty. Other than Zhang Julu, how many of them can become first or second rank officials? On the contrary, those ordinary Jianxia are more likely to reach the top. Su Fengyan made a sound of acknowledgement and silently remembered it in his heart. Helian Wuwei said, when that master was young he wrote a piece called 9 Questions. He asked the heavens, Hutu, ghosts and deities, emperors, Buddhism, beauties, the past life and the future life. Su Fengyan wondered, there's still one question missing. Helian Wuwei smiled and said, it's said to be 9 questions but in fact there are only 8. I guess that guy asked himself on behalf of us idiots who have doubts. Su Fengyan was so angry that he laughed and said, that old man is indeed scheming. No, I have to go to Laming Temple immediately. While they were talking, a thirsty customer came forward. Su Fengyan quickly got up and eloquently helped the old farmer sell watermelons. The customer didn't know who the young man who was bargaining with him was. Furthermore, he didn't know that the old farmer was the prefectural governor. Su Fengyan also didn't know that two groups of Beiliang cavalry had suddenly attacked Beimang. He also didn't know that the Empress of Beimang, who had received the military intelligence, had dispelled the idea of personally going to the South Dynasty because of the appearance of one person. This old scholar who carried a bookcase into the palace was followed by Beimang's #1 swordsman. Shuizhong VIP subscription group announce a Shuizhong group. Those who subscribe to Shuizhong can join the group. Group number 165500001. Chapter 587. The next chapter starts at around 4 in the morning. Compared to the Imperial Palace of Great Peace City, which was like the Imperial Palace of Nine Heavens, the Palace of Beimang was like a child playing house. It could not withstand a few trips by agile eunuchs. The great eunuch Sun Dingxing would feel some regret every time he looked down at the palace from a higher position. His status was about the same as Han Diaoxi's, but the Palace of Beimang did not favor eunuchs. There were only about 3,000 eunuchs in the palace, which was less than the Imperial Palace of South Korea. This made Sun Dingxing very annoyed. When the Empress arrived, she changed the itinerary and cancelled the imperial inspection to South Korea. This made Sun Dingxing, who had finally left the palace, angry. However, when he secretly waited at the palace gate today and saw the old scholar and the man with the sword, he could not help but gasp when he guessed their identities. Then he felt a great honor. His smile became more respectful and sincere. He did not dare to say a word and silently led the two into the palace. Unexpectedly, it was the guest who took the initiative to speak warmly. "Supervisor Sun, how are you?" Sun Dingxing was flattered. He had only met the old man once more than 10 years ago. At that time he was just a newly appointed eunuch. Besides, the eunuchs of Beimang had no power to speak of. He did not dare to hope that the old man would remember his face, let alone his surname. Sun Dingxing, who had been walking carefully in front but could only keep a distance of half a step, quickly bowed even more. He laughed softly and said, "In reply to the imperial peace decree, I am fine. My life belongs to Her Majesty. I dare not fall ill. The imperial peace decree's complexion is good. This is Beimang's fortune." The old scholar laughed and said, "Supervisor Sun, thank you for your auspicious words." Sun Dingxing bowed and led the way. He smiled and said, "I wouldn't dare." The old scholar did not go overboard and did not exchange pleasantries. He put his hands in his sleeves and squinted at the somewhat unfamiliar palace. They walked up the steps, past the Vermilion Gate and went down the steps. It was the Jade Square outside the main hall. The ups and downs of life were so similar. The old scholar looked back at his junior who was 5 steps away and said somewhat guiltily, "I caused you to not be able to compete with Dong Tai." The middle-aged swordsman shook his head and hesitated for a moment before saying, "Sir, you have 9 questions. I can only ask. As for the sword Dao? Ask. Subtracting 1 word, the difference is 10,000 miles. Dong Tai underestimated you." The middle-aged man with a sword on his back was famous in the Beimang royal court. His nickname, Sword Oraneerer, was truly worthy of his name. Li Mixi was a powerful official who was highly regarded by the Empress. He was the bloody executioner who controlled almost all the dark forces in the dynasty. In the past 10 years, he had been assassinated by the sword residence master many times. Some of the nobles in the imperial tent joked that Zhu Yi was able to improve over the years because Sword Oraneerer was good at finding flaws. Sword Oraneerer was a very boring man. His appearance was boring and his personality was boring. His ordinary name had long been replaced by his nickname. Other than practicing the sword, he had no other interests. He was not interested in women, power, or eloquence. He was only interested in sword aura. However, Li Mixi had a very high opinion of this archenemy who did not change despite repeated admonishments. Even the Empress was furious with him. Sword Oraneerer only showed 60 to 70% of his strength because he only allowed himself to be defeated. He did not have any interest in killing others. When Li Chungang was young, he once said that Beimang did not have a sword. After Dong Tai became a swordsman, he also said that Beimang did not have a sword. Beimang originally thought that the sword residence master would intercept the peach blossom sword deity. Even if he did not defeat Dong Tai, he would at least make him take back his words. However, Sword Oraneerer was very disappointing. He did not show himself. It seemed that in his eyes, escorting the old scholar to the north was more important than anything else. Sun Dingxing slightly quickened his pace. There were 9 levels of suet jade stairs in front of the main hall of the Beimang Palace. A woman with a cold face stood high on the stairs. She was dressed in a bright yellow dragon robe. The old scholar laughed and said, "We're almost there." He was about to meet the Empress, the most famous woman in the world. However, the old man still had the mood to leisurely turn his head and ask, Huang Qing, after today, you should go to the Liang dynasty. You can't let Beimeng know that Dong Tai is Li Chungang, but Liang does not know that Huang Qing also has a sword. Sword Aura nearer nodded and stopped almost at the same time as the head eunuch Sun Dingxing. The old man continued to walk forward. He did not kneel to the empress. The empress, who was known for her great talent and bold vision, did not condemn him. However, she did not walk down the stairs, not even one step. The old scholar raised his head and looked at her. The empress's face was old, but her eyes and eyebrows were faintly discernible. She was indeed a beautiful woman when she was young. She stood alone on the stairs and looked coldly at the Taiping magistrate who had left Beimeng in a fit of anger. After a long silence, she finally smiled and said, According to your request, the palace has done everything. Shall we begin? The old scholar did not stand on ceremony. He walked up the first step, took down the book box and waved his hand. Nearly 200 palace maids and eunuchs holding satin scrolls entered one after another. They bent their knees and placed the satin scrolls on the left and right sides of the square. They walked backward with their heads bowed, each holding a long scroll. Without exception, they all stood back to back in the center of the square. The empress suddenly squinted and looked at the square. Hundreds of satin scrolls formed a huge painting. It was the territory of the two dynasties of Beimeng and Liang. It was so detailed that it included every military town, every river and every vein. The world was under her feet. Therefore, the empress subconsciously took the first step and walked to the eighth step. Standing high, she could see further. However, her ambition had been more than just looking since the first day she entered the palace. The two dynasties were beautiful. It was a magnificent sight. The outline of the Beimeng dynasty was written in white on a black background. The territory of the Liang dynasty was written in black on a white background. Chapter 588. A chessboard and a game of chess. Black and white faced each other. The empress smiled and said, Taiping Ling has always been good at playing chess. Are you going to make a game of chess for me today? Do you want me to walk on this country with you? The old scholar did not reply. He waited until those meticulous female officials and eunuchs who were sweating profusely had quietly left the square. He opened his book box, took out a bamboo pole and a few pieces of black charcoal, sat down and raised his head. Your Majesty does not need to step down for the time being. Today allow me to talk about the right time, the right place and the right people. Tomorrow I will talk in detail about the geography, people, military power and customs that I have seen in the spring and autumn of the Central Plains. On the third day I will talk about the border between the two dynasties, just to solve the urgent situation. On the fourth day I will talk about the specific matters of our dynasty and how to win the hearts of the scholars. On the fifth day I will talk about how to destroy Beiliang, occupy Shishu and annex Nanzhao. On the sixth day I will talk about how to direct the spearhead to Graydon City and finally pacify the world. On the seventh day I will talk about how to govern the country. Even though the empress had experienced many ups and downs, when she heard these bold words that could swallow the world, she was stunned for a moment. She walked down a step and imitated Taiping Ling and the old scholar sitting on the ground. The old man first put down the charcoal that would be used to add the finishing touch. His hands leaned on the bamboo pole that he used to use to climb mountains and wade through rivers. He had already rubbed it until it was smooth and clean. He looked at the square and said calmly, Huang Longsher once said that the general trend of the world is that after being separated for a long time, it will be united, and after being united for a long time, it will be divided. At the beginning of the spring and autumn, the Liang dynasty destroyed 8 countries and used the momentum of successive victories to conquer our dynasty. They seemed unstoppable, but they did not know that after a spurt of energy, there would be a time when they would be exhausted. Liang's army was exhausted and attacked the north. Although Beimeng was resting and waiting for an exhausted enemy, at that time Her Majesty had just ascended the throne and the situation was not stable. She did not hesitate to take the risk and fought for a very difficult balance. In fact, at that time the timing was still on Liang's side. It was just that Beimeng's geographical situation was very different from that of the Central Plains, so the 400,000 soldiers were not acclimatized. In addition, the late emperor of Liang had been afraid of Su Xiao of Beiliang for a long time. He was afraid that the Beiliang cavalry would devour the wolves. After destroying Beimeng, Su Xiao could not divide Jiangnan into the north, but now he could. After all, Beimeng worshipped martial arts and not literature. If Beiliang occupied the rich Heyang corridor, which was enough to stand on its own, and took the north into its pocket, this kind of confrontation between the north and the south could be considered stable. Therefore, the late emperor of Liang issued a secret edict and forced Su Xiao to retreat under the favorable situation. He signed a contract with Beimang. It was not a brilliant move, but it was also not a bad move. This created the current tripartite situation of Liang, Liang Mang, and Mang Qingshan. This is the first principle that I want to tell your majesty. The timing is not as good as the geographical location, and the geographical location is not as good as the harmony between people. The strength of a country is not in the natural barrier, but in the people's hearts. The people's hearts are not as simple as the people's hearts. Since ancient times, the common people have followed the trend, but they must not be blind. The scholars of the spring and autumn period attach themselves to Beimang. For Beimang, it is a blessing and a curse. We must observe. This old official traveled around the Central Plains and memorized 2,643 people of all kinds. I will tell you one by one, each with a rough outline. Your Majesty, please find a female official to record them. A farmer can cultivate 30 mu of land. He can harvest 2 or 3 dawn of rice per mu, 2 dawn of rice per mu, 1 dawn of rice per mu. A family of 5 eats 1 liter of rice per day, 18 dawn of rice per year, about 12 dawn of rice left over. In addition, clothing, marriage, sacrifice, birth, old age, sickness, death, and so on all require expenses. If there is drought, flood, locusts, and disaster, the family will be hard-pressed to make ends meet. This old official is talking about the situation in Suang, Jianghu, Western Shu, and other places where the empire's granaries are located. In other places, there are often people who marry but have no children. It is not rare to see a large number of people who do not have roots. The Liang dynasty's so-called peace and tranquility is quite exaggerated. The Liang dynasty already has officials, no feudalism, and the officials have signs of feudalism. The officials cannot be appointed by the locals, but the officials are different. For generations they will be local officials. In less than 100 years there will be local snakes everywhere. Zhang Julu is anxious and many of his hasty policies have to be rushed. I will choose 3 kinds of sea merchants, salt merchants, and tea merchants to talk about the Liang dynasty's finance and taxation. The Liang dynasty's newly appointed official position is the Liang dynasty's Secretary of Current Affairs. The important officials of the military and the state will be given a title every month. They are divided into the imperial family, the imperial concubines, the 5 types of rights, public clothing, Taoism, auspicious and barbarian, and 21 others. I will tell you one by one. Your Majesty will know 1 leaf of autumn and 21 leaves of Liang. The Longhu Mountain does not worry about danger. Your Majesty should take this opportunity to order the imperial preceptor to compile 10,000 volumes of Taoist canon and let the Taoism sect become the leader of the world's Taoism. Your Majesty must not just watch the battle between the Red sect and the Yellow sect in the western region. Our dynasty can destroy the great Buddha of the Zen sect, but we must establish the little Buddha of the esoteric sect. The Taiping commandant spoke tirelessly about everything in the world, regardless of whether it was big or small. The empress sat on the steps on the first day and walked down the steps on the second day. She followed the old man and walked on the beautiful embroidery. He spoke non-stop at night. The lanterns were hung high and the lights were as bright as day. No one was allowed to set foot on the square, so the empress personally held the lantern to illuminate the old man. On the next day the 2 8 and 8 casually squatted or sat on the satin painting. The empress even hung a cloth bag filled with warm water and food. If the old man felt thirsty or hungry, he did not need to speak and could reach out his hand to ask for food. The Taiping commandant had to draw circles on the ground every time they passed a boundary. He had used up countless pieces of charcoal and his 10 fingers were pitch black. Every time he hurriedly washed his hands, the water basin would be emptied. The empress's dragon robe had wide sleeves and long hemline. Later on, she simply tied it with a silk thread to make it easier for her to walk. She did not care about etiquette at all. On the 5th page, the empress still did not show the slightest sign of tiredness and was in high spirits. She spoke with a belly full of knowledge in 7 days. The old man walked out of the world's largest map and stood at the bottom of the steps. The empress held his hand and walked up the steps with her back facing the slightly wrinkled beautiful landscape. She said calmly, "May you be the imperial preceptor." Chapter 589. Fortunately, Helian Wuwei's prestige was there, so no one dared to go against it. Helian Wuwei also gave a lot of compensation to the noble families on both sides of the lower reaches of the Yellow River. Many children of the aristocratic families were able to enter Kung Bijuan. Their official positions were not high, but it was also a good thing that they did not dare to dream of in the past. Coupled with the diversion of the river, it was only a 20-mile semicircle, so it could not be considered a serious injury. For a time, Shihe Prefecture was still calm and peaceful. There were only some rumors and gossips in private among the aristocratic families. The common people were still going on with their lives. It was a pity that the imperial edict ordered that no business was allowed near the river. With Kung Bijuan in charge of supervising and patrolling, there would be a windfall otherwise. A horse would not get fat if it did not feed at night. The principle of the world was the same. Su Fengyin and Helian Wuwei came to the place where they threw stones and cut the river. This time, the theft of Emperor Qin's mausoleum, which had not seen the light of day for nearly 1,000 years, caused the various forces to be intertwined. Helian Wuwei was in charge of the dangerous business of opening the door to the thieves. Not to mention the other people who crossed the river, one General Zhong Shintong was enough to deal with. Therefore the old imperial edict did not dare to be careless. Everything was handed over to his trusted aide, Kung Bijuan. Su Fengyin saw a group of men and women dressed in Confucian attire on the high platform. Most of them looked haggard and did not have the elegance of a scholar at all. Su Fengyin was surprised and asked, "Children of the school of Moism?" Helian Wuwei nodded and smiled. He did not elaborate on his family background. Su Fengyin changed into a scholar's old man's face. When he climbed over the wall and entered the imperial edict mansion, he was recognized by the white-haired old man at a glance. Other than the spring thunder saber hanging from his waist, the main reason was that the old man and the young man could be said to have known each other for many years. The old man's face was at the root level. The disguise only changed the appearance, but it did not change the qi. That was why the old man's identity was seen through. The witch Xu Xiu used 10 years of her life as the price to create a soul-level face. She handed it over to Murong Tonghuang, who was far more ambitious than her sister Murong Wuzhu. Helian Wuwei took Su Fengyin and walked slowly along the riverbank. A few days ago there was a rare rainstorm. At the beginning of the river cutting, the effect was not obvious yet. The water level of the river was still much higher than the previous years. The water was turbulent and surging, it was very muddy. The sound of the rushing river was like a thunderclap, intimidating people just by looking at it. Su Fengyin left the spring thunder saber and the spring thunder saber at his mansion. His hands were empty as he squatted on a huge rock by the riverbank. The water vapor assaulted his face. His ears swelled as he heard the sound. The flow of his qi was imperceptibly pulled by the river, so it was several times faster than usual. Helian Wuwei threw a stone into the river. There was not even a splash. He said with emotion, "When I was young I often swam in the river after the rain, but I liked to swim against the current. Now I can't swim anymore. After I got old, I became interested. If I really want to go into the river, I can only choose the gentle part of the river. Even if I don't want to, I have to be old." Just as Su Fengyin was about to speak, he saw a group of people dressed in luxurious clothes slowly approaching. They were talking and laughing. The leader of the group was a tall man. His simple gestures had the aura of a ruler. Behind the man were a few unfamiliar faces. Lu Gui and Lu Qin, father and daughter, Zhong Tan and the maidservant Lu Daogu. Other than Lu Qin, he had only met the rest of them once. Su Fengyin was originally worried that Lu Qin would be exposed after seeing him. He did not expect that she would not even look at him. She was even more of a stranger than a stranger. Su Fengyin squatted and did not get up. Helian Wuwei glanced at him and restrained his qi. He said calmly, "That is Grand Admiral Zhong. He has a good relationship with Beimang's imperial tent. He is better at being a person than leading an army. It's a pity that his brother, Zhong Liang, is not here today." When Zhong Shintong saw Helian Wuwei, he laughed and walked quickly towards him. He kept a distance from the people behind him. The powerful Grand Admiral Zhong regarded himself as a junior. He cupped his fists and said, "Greetings, old General Helian." Helian Wuwei didn't want General Zhong to give him the cold shoulder. He slapped Su Fengyin's head as if he was an elder disciplining a good-for-nothing nephew. He scolded angrily, "Get up and salute General Zhong." Su Fengyin helplessly stood up and bowed with his hands clasped in front of him. Helian Wuwei looked angry. He sighed and said, "I've made a fool of myself in front of General Zhong. This distant relative's younger generation is stubborn and doesn't know the rules." The old man turned around and glared at him. "You think you can be arrogant just because you read a few baskets of books? Did you become the top scholar or the prime minister? You only know how to look at the sky from the bottom of a well. You're useless. Take General Zhong's eldest son, Zhong Tan for example. He's only a few years older than you, but he's already a real Jinglang commandant. He's in charge of 3,000 elite soldiers and almost became the first top scholar in this dynasty. He's 100 times better than your useless articles. Zhong Shentong saw that this good-looking young man wanted to say something but stopped. He must be afraid of the Zhong family's reputation, so he suppressed his scholarly spirit. However, he did not look happy. Grand Admiral Zhong was not surprised that Helian Wuwei was a distant relative. Helian's surname was a popular surname in Shihe province. Helian Wuwei was born in an official's family. However, his family declined and he joined the army. Helian Wuwei was a general who had fought hundreds of battles. He was famous in Beimang for being a diligent scholar. He had never fallen behind in his military career. He had a good impression of scholars. If a descendant from a declining family had a chance to become the top scholar, Zhong Shentong would also have high hopes for him. Zhong Shentong did not want this kind of trivial matter to dampen the atmosphere and harm the long-term situation. Therefore, he smiled and comforted, "Old general, don't think too highly of my son. He's just a few years older than Helian." Su Fengyan whispered, 3,000 soldiers and horses are nothing. When I become famous in the imperial court, even leading 30,000 cavalry will be too little. Chapter 590. Helian Wuwei kicked him and glared at him, saying, "Those armchair strategists of yours don't count for shit." Su Fengyan dodged the soft kick and turned his back to the crowd, as if he was being looked down upon by an elder in front of an outsider. He was somewhat embarrassed. Zhong Shentong found it amusing to see Helian Wuwei and the others staring at him with wide eyes and thick necks. He acted as a peacemaker and said a few polite words about how it was a good thing to be young and ambitious. Then, the two mainstays of the Beimang army left the crowd and walked along the shore. What they were talking about was naturally the next step after cutting off the river and cutting off the flow of the river. Both of them seemed like straightforward old foxes, so it was inevitable that they would scheme against each other. Generally speaking, the elite army of Heshi, Kung Bijuan, was responsible for cutting off the river and expelling those Jianghu idlers who dared to approach Emperor Qin's mausoleum. The Zhong family had promised to bring Kung Bijuan a large amount of high-quality iron or at an extremely low price. The old man had a pure heart and few desires, and his reputation was second to none among Beimang's 8 feudal officials. Zhong Shentong also did not believe that Helian Wuwei would covet the treasures in the mausoleum and have the intention to kill him. If it was Murong Baoding whose martial prowess was above Zhong Liang's, Zhong Shentong would never dare to ask a tiger for its skin. They had a secret conversation and the conversation was very pleasant. Zhong Shentong looked back. Zhong Tan and the father and daughter of the Lu family did not fit in with Hulian's younger generation. It was reasonable. Zhong Shentong frowned as he walked slowly. His younger brother said that he wanted to go to the princess's tomb. He asked him why, but he did not answer. He had long been accustomed to his younger brother's absurd and unrestrained behavior. However, this time entering the tomb was of great importance, and there was no room for the slightest mistake. Zhong Shentong knew a little about the relationship between Zhong Liang and the little girl in the princess's tomb, but he did not know the bottom of it. Zhong Shentong also did not want to get to the bottom of it. He only hoped that this time entering the tomb with the group of wandering ghosts in the princess's tomb would not cause any unnecessary problems. As the guardian of the princess's tomb, this time it was no different from embezzlement. Zhong Shentong's heart completely did not trust them. Zhong Shentong and Helian Wuwei suddenly gathered their qi, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. In a trance, a white rainbow came across the river, tracing the source and rushing upstream. Wherever the white rainbow passed, it split the waves, and the water rose sharply by 10 feet, fiercely slapping the banks. The white rainbow rushed forward into the distance, and more than a dozen fluttering clothes like butterflies descended from the sky, as if to block the white rainbow's path. Those colorful clothes were like flying fairies in the murals, and their sleeves were several feet long. Moreover, each sleeve was connected with a wisp of cloud and mist, becoming more and more agile, like celestial beings descending to the mortal world. Zhong Tan opened his eyes wide. He naturally recognized those floating women who pretended to be mysterious. They were exactly the same as his uncle Zhong Liang's description. They were the unique colorful clothes of the princess's tomb, and they were good at the flying dance with 2 sleeves. It was said that with mutual help, the power of one sleeve could block the gods and Buddhas. A low Buddhist chant entered their ears. Su Fengyan recognized that it was the Mahastamaprapta Bodhisattva heart mantra. The rainbow-like white robe finally paused, hovering several feet above the river, and stretched out his arm to form a seal. It was a monk wearing a white kasaya, facing the 18 colorful clothes with 36 sleeves. At the end of the last word, the yellow river under his feet began to change. The name of the Buddhist mantra arrived in an instant. The surface of the river behind the white-robed monk suddenly split, and half of the water flowed away, leaving nothing behind. The newcomer stopped abruptly and suddenly rose several dozen feet, like a yellow dragon leaping into the water, drawing an arc in the air. Following the monk's one-armed seal, after covering the sky, it naturally covered the earth, and pounced on the 18 beautiful colorful clothes that were drawing the clouds from the sky. The yellow dragon went first, followed by the white robe. The beautiful colorful clothes were scattered in the blink of an eye, along with the clouds in the sky. Some of the 18 women fell into the river, some fell onto the shore, and some were even knocked several dozen feet away by the yellow dragon. They were in an extremely sorry state, and no longer had the slightest bit of celestial aura. The white-robed monk ignored those women who were like mantises trying to stop a chariot, and continued along the river. The water of the yellow river came from the sky. The Beimeng Orthodoxy's Tao De sect was in the sky. If the white-robed monk wanted to go to the Tao De sect that was overseen by the Qilin spiritual master, the easiest route would be to walk along the river. Zhong Shentong said with a gloomy expression, "White-robed monk Li Xiaoxin." Helian Wuwei sighed in admiration, as expected of the invincible Vajra that once made the #1 person of Beimeng helpless. Zhong Tan turned his head to the maid Lu Daogu and joked, "Your Princess Tom's soaring sleeves are too weak. With just this weight you want to challenge the great idea Luo Yang?" The maid dismissed it with a smile and pointed a finger into the distance. The 18 colorful clothes failed to stop him, and a tall figure appeared out of nowhere. They were too far away and it was impossible to tell if he was a man or a woman. When this person spread out his arms, it was an extremely grotesque appearance of 4 arms. When this freak raised his arms, the 18 defeated colorful clothes were pulled into the air like puppets on strings. Zhong Tan said in surprise, "It's your little idea? Then my uncle's taste is too heavy." Lu Dogu shook her head and said, "It's a living dead object that has been enshrined in my princess tomb for 300 years. I advise you not to go near and see it with your own eyes, or else you won't be able to sleep." In addition to having 4 arms, she was born with 2 faces, one of which is Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's compassionate face, and the other is joyful face. Zhong Tan clicked his tongue and said, "Scary, scary." When the white-robed monk on the river saw this filthy object, he was finally angry. He shouted, "My Buddha Tathagata! You evil creature, why don't you rush to the void by yourself?" He raised his palm and the clouds in the sky drooped down. Countless golden lights shone through the gaps between the clouds, and the Buddha's light was boundless. Then the white-robed monk's hands formed 3 mudras in an instant, which were respectively cleansing sin, and destroying sin. In the blink of an eye, the rainbow disappeared into the distance, leaving only a sentence, "When I return from the Tao De sect, I'll send you into reincarnation." The otherworldly object curled up into a ball, and then stretched out as before. However, the 18 colorful clothes puppets were all destroyed. After the otherworldly object stood up straight, it stiffly twisted its neck. Then it went straight to Su Fengyin. Su Fengyin was dumbfounded. "Did I provoke you?" Chapter 591. Chapter 1. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. That filthy thing ran towards Su Fengyin on the river with a happy face. Its beautiful face looked like a happy woman, but behind its face, it gave off a gloomy and lifeless aura. There was no joy in it at all, especially when this 300-year-old freak had 4 arms. When it flew across the river, all 6 of its limbs swayed back and forth. It was wearing a vermilion robe with wide sleeves, which made it look even more strange and terrifying. Su Fengyin knew that. Just now he and Helian Wuwei had been putting on a show. He had plotted against Helian Wuwei and fooled the old fox, Zhong Shentong. If he was forced to reveal his true form by the strange otherworldly item, let alone Zhong Shentong, even a fool would be suspicious. Besides, Su Fengyin was unarmed. He didn't have the spring and autumn sword or the spring thunder saber. Although the otherworldly item was defeated by Li Dongxin's 3 seals, Su Fengyin didn't have that kind of skill. He cursed in his heart and looked around, hoping for a hero or heroine to help him. Unfortunately, he didn't see the white-clothed great devil Luo Yang or Zhong Shentong. Instead, he caught a glimpse of the mischievous look in Zhong Tan's eyes. When he looked at Su Fengyin, Zhong Tan didn't even bother to hide it. Obviously, he was sure that Su Fengyin would be swallowed by the otherworldly item. Therefore, he didn't bother to hide his plan with a man who was about to die. In the end, the old military commander was kind-hearted. He took a step forward and stood in front of Su Fengyin. He was betting that Zhong Shentong would intercept the otherworldly item for the sake of the tomb robbery plan. However, he didn't expect that Zhong Shentong would be so calm. He squinted his eyes and didn't say anything. He just stood aside and watched. Facing this unexpected disaster, Su Fengyan sighed inwardly. He didn't have the face to make an old man with mediocre martial arts suffer. He took a step forward and passed by the Hellion Wu. Although he had restrained his chi for 50 to 60%, his momentum was already as loud as thunder. The otherworldly item kept in the princess tomb was right in front of him. The bright red robe turned around, and the joyful face turned into the compassionate face of Xidigarba. Its 4 hands were like a cage that covered Su Fengyan's head. Su Fengyan twisted his legs, and his empty hands formed the Fuyao stance. The green-robed Su Fengyan was like a green dragon drinking water. This was the first time he clashed with the otherworldly item. 2 of the arms of the red-robed otherworldly item were deflected by the Fuyao stance, but 2 of its arms were still hooked onto Su Fengyan's shoulders. Fortunately, the wounds were not so deep that his bones could be seen. Su Fengyan, who didn't dare to use all his strength to resist, was lifted up by the otherworldly item and thrown into the turbulent yellow river. When the otherworldly item saw Su Fengyan bending his knees and squatting on the surface of the river, he slapped the water with his palm and rushed to the other side of the river. The otherworldly item chased after him. Its speed was much faster than the retreating Su Fengyan. When it was only 20 feet away from the surface of the river, the otherworldly item's bright red gown made a few almost inaudible puffing sounds. However, its 4 hands still clung onto Su Fengyan's head and hands. Just as it was about to exert its strength to tear them apart, Su Fengyan looked at the joyful face a few feet away from him. His entire body sank and he brought the otherworldly item down into the murky river. The moment he entered the river, apart from the golden-threaded morning dew double swords, he didn't care if he left any traces behind. The other 10 flying swords flew out of his sleeves at the same time. Not only that, he used the golden-threaded morning dew double swords to protect his body. He also used the golden-threaded morning dew double swords that Luo Yang used last time at Duanwang City Gate. He used the water as a sword and the sword aura rolled down the dragon wall toward the extremely repulsive otherworldly item. In addition, he also used the Immortal's head stroke along with his Hushu paddle. He didn't care about anything else as he randomly slapped the otherworldly item. Fortunately, they were in a hidden place near the bottom of the river. If they were on land, this kind of lowly technique, which looked like a hoodlum fighting a shrew, would be really embarrassing. However, it couldn't be said to be methodical, but its power was impressive. The otherworldly item was obviously hit several times by the Immortal's head stroke. The man and the monster completely slipped away from the bottom of the river. It was probably because Su Fengyan's methods were endless and the monster's brain was not that bright. For a moment it was actually controlled by Su Fengyan. Other than being unable to struggle free, Su Fengyan's injuries were not serious. The river water was filthy, so Su Fengyan could not see whether Su Fengyan's expression was happy or sorrowful. With the support of the great yellow quartz cultivation and the great Vajra's physique, one breath after another, his chi ascending to the Kunlun mountains and circulating endlessly. This time he attacked to his heart's content. Everyone on the shore had different expressions, but without prior agreement, they all ran downstream along the shore. Hellion Wuwei's face was ashen. He first glared at Zhong Shentong, but seeing this fellow's indifferent expression, he saved his energy. His mind was full of thoughts, thinking about how to save Su Fengyan. Not to mention this fellow's sensitive identity, just based on the fact that they had been close friends for a long time, Hellion Wuwei could not bear for him to die for no reason in the Yellow River. Taking 10,000 steps back, if Su Fengyan died in front of him, what if lame Su lost his mind and acted up? Did he really think that the Bailiang cavalry would not have the guts to trample all the way to Shihe province? Hellion Wuwei was not afraid of war, nor was he afraid of the suffering of the people. However, the old man only wanted to fight Gu Jiantang head-on one day. He did not want to be enemies with the people who had saved his life on the battlefield. Hellion Wuwei did not want to be enemies with Gu Jiantang. In the distance, more than a dozen elite guards were waiting for orders. When the otherworldly items suddenly attacked, they galloped toward Hellion Wuwei. The old man gave the order in a deep voice, asking them to go to the Zhejiang station and mobilize 1,000 elite Kung Bijuan soldiers to help. Hellion Wuwei was originally a guest of the Princess Tomb who favored Big Idea. He was not afraid of offending Small Idea's faction. How dare he attack me in front of me? Does he really think that Kung Bijuan is useless? As an outsider, Zhong Tan was particularly relaxed. He could watch a good show if it didn't concern him. While running, he even had the mood to flirt with the maidservant. So this guy is actually a real person who doesn't show his true colors. He looks like a pale-faced scholar, but he can actually take the attack of that filthy thing head-on. If it were me, I wouldn't be that relaxed. Let me tell you first, you can't fall in love with him at first sight. The maidservant Lu Daogu's waist was wearing a delicate sachet embroidered with half of a woman's face. She subconsciously touched the sachet and said helplessly, "Young master, you must be joking." Chapter 592. Lu Gui did not move. The ancestral temple of Lu was made up of scholars through and through. He might as well not join in the fun and stay far away from this troublesome place. This kind of supernatural power could not be provoked, and Helian Wu was the same. One was a great general while the other was a provincial governor. Both of them were first-rate nobles in Beimang. Even the empress had to weigh their worth. Lu Gui could not afford to offend them, but he could at least avoid them. When Lu Qin wanted to follow the group, he was stopped by his father. Lu Qin turned his back to his father. His shoulders were trembling as he stared blankly at the surface of the river with splashes of water. "You're so stingy that you didn't even tell me your real name. Are you going to die just like that?" The 18 puppets stood up again and flew in all directions. Their long sleeves fluttered in the wind, making them look very beautiful. Then they rushed into the river again. Su Fengyin was very busy underwater. He either used the opening shoe style to open the river or used the 12 flying swords to tie his hair. In short, he did everything he could to prevent the otherworldly item from getting close to him. He used all of his trump cards. Since no one could see what was going on underwater, he could find some joy in the midst of hardship. The otherworldly item's killing technique had not yet been revealed. However, even after being pierced by dozens of flying swords, it did not show any signs of weakness. The red-robed man with a strong aura was still wandering around the area of 3 feet around Su Fengyin. He was like a lingering spirit that was attached to the bone. The good times did not last long. When the 18 colorful clothes entered the water one after another, Su Fengyin began to be battered and exhausted. The women in colorful clothes were dead creatures that did not know pain. They did not have any so-called fatal injuries. Each of their sleeves was a long sword. They hit Su Fengyin's chest in one hit. A submerged reef was smashed by Su Fengyin's back. This group hunt reminded Su Fengyin of the dangerous scene when he fought against Bodhisattva Tuoba on the grassland. He began to be malicious and full of hostility. He hardened his heart and took a blow from the sleeve. His right hand pulled the sleeve in front of him and his left hand slapped the woman in colorful clothes from head to toe. The colorful clothes that lost their support floated to the surface of the water. Their beauty disappeared in a flash on the surface of the river and quickly disappeared in the rolling East River. The otherworldly item was very patient, and its 4 arms were not for nothing. It lured the remaining Kai into the water, and when it failed to hit him, it would come out and wait for an opportunity to make its move. Su Fengyin was tired of dealing with it. Suddenly the pressure on Su Fengyin suddenly decreased, and at the same time he lost the aura of the Kai and the Kai. Even though he was swimming under the water, Su Fengyin could still hear the roaring sound that shook his eardrums. He cursed in his heart. It was a fall into the water. When he was touring the Yellow River with Helian Wu, the old man told him about a magnificent scenic spot with steep boulders on both sides of the river. The mouth of the river contracted and tied up the slender waist of a woman. The water of the river gathered into a horseshoe-shaped valley and flowed down 3,000 feet. It was enough to shake the hearts of the tourists. However, the problem was that Su Fengyin was in the middle of it and he was not in the mood to relax at all. He knew that Vermilion's double-faced otherworldly item would kill him in the next moment, so he focused and held his breath. Sure enough, the water fell into the mouth of the giant pot, and Su Fengyin was pushed out of the water column by the inertia. He was suspended in the air for a moment. Amidst the rising mist, the water in the big pot under Su Fengyin's feet was boiling. The otherworldly item was only a little bit lower in the air, and its face was full of joy. The 17 Kai clothes attacked at the same time, and Su Fengyin was pushed half away. However, more than 10 long sleeves still wrapped around his head and limbs. If this kind of technique succeeded, it would be 100 times more cruel than being torn apart by 5 horses. Su Fengyin's body did not fall but instead rose higher. The qi in his body flowed like a river flowing into the sea, one acupoint after another, meridian after meridian. He clapped his palms together and bowed like a monk. As he clapped his palms together, the entire magnificent waterfall suddenly stopped. The Yellow River, which had flowed to the sea for thousands of years, suddenly flowed against the current. A fault that had not been seen for hundreds of years appeared in the river. The cliff behind Su Fengyin revealed its true appearance, shocking the world. It was a 9-dragon wall with 9 ferocious dragons fighting over a huge pearl. It was vivid and lifelike. The torrential river had washed over the dragon wall for nearly 1,000 years, but the dragon wall was still intact. The profound and mysterious carvings in the past were simply unimaginable. At the critical moment, the red-robed Yin Lu showed a hint of absent-mindedness. Su Fengyin was the initiator of this miracle, but he didn't know how magnificent the scene behind him was. At this moment, if he dared to be distracted, Su Fengyin wouldn't be able to survive even if he had several more lives. Since the otherworldly item had revealed its weakness, Shi Yin didn't hesitate to take it. He clasped his palms together to gather energy. His palms touched his palms, then he suddenly opened them. Normally, qi, whether it was the true qi of Taoism or the righteous qi of Confucianism, was as mysterious as the words in the ancient books. Since ancient times, they were mysterious and could only be meditated on but not seen. It was common sense. However, a purple mark appeared between Su Fengyin's eyebrows on his palm. It condensed into a purple qi that naked eyes could see. Purple qi from the east. Purple with a hint of gold. The purple qi moved like a dragon, piercing through the 17-colored clothes. The otherworldly item could only watch helplessly as the puppets that the princess tomb had spent countless resources to build were blown up. It gazed at the dazzling purple qi and stuck out its tongue to lick the corner of its mouth. It looked like a greedy glutton who had seen the most delicious food in the world. One by one, the colorful clothes fell into the misty river channel. They spun around and disappeared without a trace. The spendthrift vermilion opened its mouth, shrank its abdomen, and inhaled quickly. Su Fengyin didn't have time to guide the purple qi back to his body. He saw the purple qi, which was only 1/3 of its original size, being sucked into the otherworldly item's mouth. Its eyes were filled with purple qi, and its happy face became even more sinister. Its cheeks puffed up as it chewed. In the next moment, it dashed to Su Fengyin, who was like an arrow at the end of its flight. Then it pounded on Su Fengyin's chest with its 4 hands. Su Fengyin's Fata Morgana immediately collapsed like a building. At this moment he finally understood how cruel the otherworldly item's attacks were. It wasn't stupid or weak, but it was too smart. Not only did it know how to show its weakness to the enemy, but it also knew how to deal a fatal blow at the right place and time. The power of the blow didn't split open Su Fengyin's stomach, but it still sent him flying like a kite with its string cut. The giant stone wall was carved with 9 dragons fighting for a pearl. The river, which had stopped flowing for a while, continued to pour down. Su Fengyin was about to do his best to exchange his life with the otherworldly item. Out of the corner of his eyes, he saw the man in white floating over. He pressed one hand on the otherworldly item's face and pushed it toward the 9-dragon stone wall. When he brushed past Su Fengyin, he gently pushed his palm forward. Both of them and Vermilion's otherworldly item flew toward the dragon wall. The man in white pressed his palm on the pearl that looked like a pearl and pushed it a few inches into the dragon wall. A big mountain wall suddenly turned upside down, and the 3 of them were smashed into the wall. Outside the wall, the river was still flowing. Inside the wall, there was a completely different world. Chapter 593. Chapter 2. After the dragon wall flipped over, it was another world. However, it was not a dazzling array of jewels but a pitch-black one. Since he was already here, he might as well take things as they came. Su Fengyin staggered and looked around. He could roughly see that it was a 10-feet-wide corridor. The imperial mausoleum had the style of a royal family, but there was still a distance from the tomb. This journey was destined to be dangerous. Su Fengyin would rather die than walk in front. Without the protection of a yin-yang master or a mechanism master, recklessly entering was no different from committing suicide. Su Fengyin was just about to discuss with the white-clothed demon whether or not to throw the 2-faced, 4-armed demon into the corridor. Unexpectedly, the woman kicked the red-robed otherworldly creature into the corridor and grabbed Su Fengyin with one hand, throwing them in together. Not only could he see the 2 tigers fighting, but he could also test the secrets. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Su Fengyin had just cursed in his mind when that filthy thing stretched out its arms to attack him. It was more than 10 feet wide, so it couldn't move nimbly. Therefore, Su Fengyin had no choice but to fight it in close quarters. It was said that 2 fists couldn't fight 4 hands. If Su Fengyin really encountered one with 4 arms, he wouldn't even have a place to complain. Perhaps it was because it no longer wanted to hide its strength, so it attacked Su Fengyin fiercely like raindrops. It hit Su Fengyin's crotch with its knee. Su Fengyin wasn't a clay bodhisattva who didn't care about worldly affairs, so he didn't hold back. He used one hand to press the otherworldly item's knee and let the evil creature's hands slap around his ears. Then he used its remaining hands to push his chest. Su Fengyin risked his life to punch the otherworldly item's heart. Both of them hit the wall at the same time, but they didn't forget to kick each other. Then they used the rebound momentum to give each other an even more vicious blow. Su Fengyin was hit between the eyebrows of the otherworldly item with his finger. Then he hit the wall with a dull thud. Both of them bounced back and forth like two rubber balls. Both of them were full of killing intent. The otherworldly item's red robe fluttered like a red bat, aiming at Su Fengyin's crotch. It was addicted to teasing his crotch. Su Fengyin's wet green robe had already been dried by his qi. He rewarded the otherworldly item with a few flicks of his finger and hit Su Fengyin's forehead between its eyebrows. If it weren't for the darkness in the corridor, this kind of fight between two donkeys would have made the onlookers cheer. Just a moment ago, Su Fengyin was close to it and grabbed its neck. He immediately raised his elbow and hit its chin. Perhaps in the next moment, their foreheads would collide. Su Fengyin didn't care about aiming and hit its chest with his fists or palms. Unexpectedly, it was as soft as a ball of cotton. Perhaps it was because of the first impression he was disgusted by the face behind its head. He felt that it was as slippery as a pile of maggots, which made him want to vomit. Along the way, Su Fengyin's face was bruised and swollen, and his body was covered in blood. He didn't know what kind of secret technique this otherworldly item had raised, but it had shown him that it was invulnerable. It was impervious to weapons, water, and fire. Su Fengyin didn't want to get hit less, but his injuries were light. This made Su Fengyin feel aggrieved. It wasn't his Royal Highness style to make a loss. Fortunately, besides suffering losses, this corridor leading to Emperor Qin's mausoleum didn't have any hidden traps. Su Fengyin fought with the otherworldly item for half a mile, but he didn't encounter any hidden traps. If he died in the same tomb as this filthy freak, Su Fengyin would die with everlasting regret. The white-clothed Luo Yang leisurely followed behind him. Suddenly she frowned. Mount Fusion. Su Fengyin knew a thing or two about geomancy, so his face changed immediately. Mount Fusion was the literal meaning. When two mountains merged, it was destined to crush the living things inside. As soon as Luo Yang finished speaking, the corridor didn't close up like Su Fengyin had expected. He and the otherworldly item had to face a common enemy, so they spread out their arms and blocked the wall. With the meticulous mind of the builder of Emperor Qin's mausoleum, the mechanism must have been triggered as soon as they entered the corridor. However, in order to avoid giving the tomb robber a chance to return, the mountain only started to close up in the middle of the corridor. They couldn't move forward or backward, so the mountain closed up as fast as lightning. Su Fengyin's aura surged, and the otherworldly item also knew the severity of the situation. The two enemies didn't dare to make things difficult for each other at this moment, so they used all their strength to push the mountain away. Mount Fusion was simple enough for a mausoleum to be built on the ground, but for Emperor Qin's mausoleum to be built on the bottom of a river, the knowledge involved was beyond imagination. Fortunately, the mountain didn't close up. Su Fengyin and the otherworldly item worked together to create a gap, so the mountain shrank back to its original position. Su Fengyin heaved a sigh of relief. Luo Yang, who was leisurely strolling in the courtyard, said coldly, "If you don't want to die, hurry up and move forward." "It's easy for you to say that." The mountain closed up again. Su Fengyin stretched out his arms and gritted his teeth. After the crisis, the otherworldly item stomped on the ground. The floor of the corridor was made of some unknown stone, but it only created a small hole that was a few inches deep. Su Fengyin saw that the otherworldly item had failed, so he stiffly twisted his neck. It was unclear whether he was annoyed or puzzled. Su Fengyin wanted to laugh, but he couldn't. This otherworldly item's brain was really F***king smart. It actually thought of digging a hole to hide. If the ground's hardness was normal, the three of them could open up a path underground. Not to mention Luo Yang, who had reached the celestial state a long time ago, even Su Fengyin and the otherworldly item could slowly move forward. In this kind of dangerous situation, a stupid method was always better than having no way to wait for death. However, the Emperor Qin's mausoleum supervisor had obviously anticipated this. This made Su Fengyin curse the 18 generations of that bastard's ancestors from 800 years ago. The interval between the mountain closing up was getting shorter and shorter. Su Fengyin's chances to take a breath were also getting smaller and smaller. However, there was still no sign of them reaching the end. His arms gradually became numb. The air in the tomb was originally turbid, and the yin qi was heavy. Su Fengyin didn't know how many times he had blocked the mountain closing up. He felt dizzy, which he hadn't felt for a long time after practicing the saber. This wasn't a good sign. The demon Luo Yang, who was even more cold-blooded than the otherworldly item, finally spoke a few words of conscience. "Don't worry and rush forward. Use your sword to explore the bottom. It's my turn." Su Fengyin gritted his teeth and ran forward. At the same time, the only complete sword embryo, Morning Dew, rushed out of his sleeve. Chapter 594. When Su Fengyin arrived at an open area, his vision suddenly widened. A large amount of white light dazzled his eyes. Su Fengyin raised his arm to block the light and squinted his eyes. Finally, he saw an ancient bronze door engraved with dense inscriptions. After being stunned for a while, when the otherworldly item also left the corridor, Su Fengyin remembered that Luo Yang was still inside. She must be struggling to move. He glanced at the otherworldly item that was eyeing him covetously and cursed it to get lost. Then he turned around and entered the corridor. He pushed open the two mountains, and the heavy gravity hit his arms again and again like a bell. Su Fengyin almost thought that his arms were going to be broken. Just as Su Fengyin's eyes turned red and he couldn't hold on any longer, a white-clothed figure appeared in front of him and kicked him out of the corridor. The exhausted Su Fengyin sat on the ground. Luo Yang looked calm, but blood seeped out of the corner of her mouth. She gently wiped it and raised her eyes to look at the bronze door that was as bright as day. The mountains behind him had completely closed. Su Fengyin stood up and tried to use a flying sword to open the door, but it didn't pierce the door at all. 800 years ago, the great Emperor Qin's kingdom could unify the world. Li Yishan once said that the Bailiang saber, which could be said to be the ultimate weapon, was born from the great Emperor Qin's standard saber. Even most of the powerful crossbows were no exception. However, the great Emperor Qin's kingdom rose like a comet and fell like a comet. Historians pretended to ignore it. Historical materials were scarce. They only knew that after the sudden death of the Emperor Qin, the entire empire was buried with him. The world was torn apart like a deer escaping from its cage. Su Fengyin felt relieved. He leaned against the stone wall and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. If he could survive, perhaps some earth-shattering secrets would be revealed to the future generations that had puzzled them for nearly 1,000 years. The otherworldly item stood at the intersection of light and darkness. It hesitated for a while but still took a step forward. As the light shone on it, its feet burned fiercely and emitted a pungent smell. He seemed to have lost his sense of pain, and ignoring his poor instep, which was almost burnt to a crisp, he sank into deep thought again. Was there a lightning pool after the mountain? Su Fengyin smiled bitterly. Squatting on the boundary between yin and yang, he raised his head and looked around. The dome was inlaid with pearls that looked like a resplendent starry sky, shining brightly. The stone walls and the ground on the left and right were covered with small mirrors polished by colored glass, interweaving with a bright light. Looking closely, those pearls were actually faintly moving like the stars of the four seasons. Su Fengyin was shocked. How could these beads be preserved for hundreds of years? One had to know that there were people who said that pearls were old and yellow. After a few years, pearls would naturally turn yellow and deteriorate. Su Fengyin had always disliked the way people worshipped the past and belittled the present. Now that he looked at it again, it was not completely unreasonable. Luo Yang stood beside Su Fengyin in silence. Luo Yang stretched out a hand and quickly drew in the air. It was as if she was spinning silk from a cocoon. She frowned as she did not get the answer she wanted. Coldly she asked, "Do you know how to move the stars?" Su Fengyin volunteered himself. "I've learned a little about Guolao's star sect, Xu Minqing's secret decree of the universe, and Lu Hong's 28 constellations. You can try to deduce it." Luo Yang turned her head and Su Fengyin met her eyes. Luo Yang sneered. "You only know how to deduce it with your mouth?" Su Fengyin resisted the urge to roll his eyes. He squatted on the ground and used a flying sword, Green Plum Blossom, to draw on the ground. From time to time he would raise his head to memorize the movement of the stars. At first it was easy to get started, but as time went by, it became more and more difficult. When the deduction reached an obscure dead end, Su Fengyin stared at the messy lines on the ground in a daze. In fact, if this task was given to his second sister, Su Weisheng, who was known as the invincible mental calculator, she might not be able to do it easily, but it would be better than Su Fengyin trying to make a Hail Mary effort. Luo Yang looked at it a few times and saw that Su Fengyin had no clue. She did not have any hope and raised her head to stare at the brilliance of the day. After a moment, Luo Yang said, "The tomb is full of the aura of death. You can live for about 4 hours." Su Fengyin simply sat down on the ground and shook his head. "That's 100% too late. Give me 2 or 3 days to get a rough idea." Luo Yang sneered, "You only know some unorthodox tricks." Su Fengyin angrily said, "Isn't it because you wanted to enter the tomb no matter what?" Luo Yang casually glanced at Su Fengyin and only said 2 words, "Lend me your sword." Su Fengyin asked, "How many?" Luo Yang asked back, "Do you have 13? Normally Su Fengnian might have said, "I still have another sword under my crotch." But at this moment he did not dare to have such shameless thoughts. The 12 riding swords formed a line and floated in front of Luo Yang. Luo Yang flicked her finger and the swords flew into the light, disappearing in a flash. One sword returned and another entered. The 12 flying swords advanced one after another. The flying swords kept circulating, dazzling the eyes. Luo Yang seemed to be talking to herself. Not a single bead can be destroyed. If the formation is destroyed, the light will explode and there will be no blind spots to escape. The infant will bear the brunt of it. You won't be able to endure for a few moments. Even if I can survive, I will not be able to open that bronze door. I brought you into the tomb to borrow your life to open the door. Infant? This otherworldly item has such a poetic title? Su Fengnian quickly came to his senses and anxiously said, "Luo Yang, explain it clearly to me. What do you mean by using my life to open the door? Borrow? How can I return my life if I borrow it?" Luo Yang calmly said, "Your body has a purple-gold aura. It is the best tonic for the infant and also the key. If Zhong Shintong and his group came to the tomb, the one to die would be a Southern Tang orphan." Su Fengnian thought for a while, then said seriously, "In that case we should die together in the Thunder Pool. If the Zhong family does not come in, thousands of years later when the later generations see our corpses, they might think that we died together for love." Luo Yang turned a deaf ear. Luo Yang played the sword as if it were a zither. Su Fengnian watched her concentrate on riding the sword back and forth. Wang Baozhuang? Devil Luo Yang? At this moment he was confused. When Su Fengnian was young he also wanted to be one of those famous experts. At the very least he wanted to be a wanderer who could take revenge. Thus, he often went to the tide listening pavilion to disturb the old people who were guarding the pavilion. He heard many stories of adventures that he did not know were true. He fell off a cliff and survived by hanging on a branch. He entered a cave and saw the corpses of experts. After kowtowing he received 1 or 2 secret manuals. After coming out he became a world-shaking expert in Jianghu. He wanted to take revenge and live a carefree life. This made the young Su Fengnian want to jump off a cliff that looked like an immortal. Later he was enlightened by his second sister. There were tens of thousands of secret manuals in the tide listening pavilion. Su Fengnian sighed. He turned around and saw the sympathetic face of the otherworldly item. He said helplessly, "I'm going to die soon. Come, give me a festive face." Su Fengnian thought that the otherworldly item would not agree. Unexpectedly, the otherworldly item spun its red robe and looked at him with a joyful face. Su Fengnian chuckled. Again. Sympathy for joy. Again. Vermilion's robe spun like a butterfly. Su Fengnian was having a lot of fun. It seemed that the otherworldly item was also having fun.